And then... What? Oh my God. What do you need? Can you hear him? Hey, my name's Kaylee. Thanks for clicking on the video. This is Read, Rant, Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. Today, we're going to be talking about Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, the infamous New York Times best-selling author, TikTok, Barnes & Noble favorite, Colleen Hoover. I don't understand, to be frank. I've watched rant reviews, I've listened to audiobooks, all of her popular ones, right? It Ends With Us, November 9, Ugly Love, Verity, Layla. I did my own rant review on Too Late. I am literally fucking digging my way through this woman's catalog to find a book that makes me understand why people are fucking obsessed with her, and I don't get it. So today we're talking about Reminders of Him. This is my most recent dive into figuring out what people enjoy. And this might have been her most promising. I'm not going to lie. This book was written in 2022, 335 pages, and as of November 18th, 2024, it is sitting at a 4.36 with 1.3 million ratings on Goodreads. Okay, so I went into this and I said, oh, 4.36. I said, oh my God, like that's really high. Like maybe this one will be the one, right? So I go into this, totally open mind. Excited. Premise seemed promising. What's the premise, you're asking? If you're unfamiliar, Kenna, the main female character, gets out of prison. She served 5 years for involuntary manslaughter. While in prison, she gave birth to a child. Said child was taken away. Parental rights were taken away. And upon her release, she goes to try and find her kid and rebuild that relationship. I was like, oh, this sounds fascinating. And for the first 20% of the book, there were some cheesy parts. There were the parts where I said, oh my God, Colleen Hoover, like, oh my God. But I enjoyed myself and I was like, this is promising. I'm so excited. I love the main male character. He's not abusive. This is going to be great. And then it derailed and I was really, really pissed off. I was so fucking mad. All of that intro, I have my 3 disclaimers that I always give on these types of videos. The first one being, this is going to contain all the spoilers. This is going to be a full chapter by chapter, beat by beat breakdown of this book. So if you actually want to read it, I'll see you in the next one. This will also... Number 2, can't tell already, I'm not a fan of Colleen Hoover. This is truly a Colleen Hoover hater account. While I will be crediting this book where credit is due and speaking highly of it and even crying, I will shed a tear during this video. I didn't like it. This review is not for Colleen, not for friends, not for family, not for stans, not for people who loved this book. Again, I'll see you in the next one. And then the last disclaimer is typically a trigger warning or like content warning of some sort. Colleen Hoover doesn't believe in them for some reason. I don't know. She's letting her readers go into this stuff blind. So there is no trigger warning provided by the author. And honestly, it's not like too triggering of a book, in my opinion. I think there are 2 topics that might be a little touchy. The first one being, it is heavily based around a car accident. Very heavy discussion of what that person goes through after said car accident that is like a little much. And then the other thing is, as stated, Kenna gives birth in prison and the baby is like taken away from her immediately. A lot of this book is kind of examining that idea of not having access to your child and your child being taken away. So if that is something that you're sensitive to, same thing, just like heads up. But this book is not nearly as dark as some of the things that we have been covering on this channel. Pretty light read. I think that's everything I have to say. I think the only other thing I did want to note, like housekeeping, on Fridays or Saturdays, I try to post a poll asking the community what they want to see. Last week, I polled the community for what they wanted to see regarding unconventional romances that I love. And that shit was so close for the Soul trilogy and for Duskwalkers by Harley LaRoe and Opal Rain, respectively. I got you, bae. Don't worry. I'm working on it, okay? I'm working on the Souls trilogy currently. That review will be coming out next week. I just had to get my Colleen Hoover one out. And then 2 weeks ago, I had people vote and Without Merit by Colleen Hoover came 2nd or 3rd place. So this one's also coming next month. Okay, so this is what you have to look forward to. And then the Duskwalker Bride series, this is one that came in 2nd place last week. I will be covering that one too, don't you worry. I love talking about books I actually like. So I'm very excited to talk about that series as well. Just a couple things for you to look forward to. We open our book. Kenna, recently released from prison, served 5 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. She was driving the car when it flipped over and her boyfriend at the time passed away. She was, because she was the driver and she was under the influence, was held accountable for those actions. There's some other stuff that we'll get into later. Went to prison for this crime. Upon her release, she's in the cab, has the cab driver taking her home, and she asks them to pull off to the side of the road because she takes his fucking memorial, his roadside memorial, the little cross. She picks it up and throws it into the back of the cab under the guise of, it might be bad karma to take a memorial, but I think it's also bad karma if you put a memorial up for somebody who has like distinctly said that they hate roadside memorials. So despite his mother placing it there, she decides that she has that call to make, that she knows the guy that she dated for 6 months better than his own mother, and takes it down. And the cab driver's like, but she does. They press on. Cab driver is taking her from Denver, Colorado, I think, to some small/medium-sized town. Place unknown. I don't know. I'm assuming we're still in Colorado. I have no idea though, because God forbid we specify a location. They get to the small town. He delivers her to this rundown apartment complex that is like in the back of a gas station parking lot. No formal lease is happening. First and last month's rent up front, and completely unofficial, like halfway condemned building, right? You got a kitchen/living room and then a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, right? Little tiny guy. But it's enough for her, right? She got out of prison. She was in a halfway house for a couple months. She saved up like $2,500 so she could afford the trip back to a small town undisclosed. She gets there. She's talking to the landlady. The landlady is like pretty dismissive and kind of like off-putting, but she says, hey, here's a kitten. She's like, hey, when you get settled, let me know and I'll bring one up for you. A kitten? Yeah, like a cat, but smaller. She's like, I don't want a kitten. She's like, well, you need to. They end up making a deal that Kenna will take the cat if the lady pays the electric for the month or something. Some stupid deal gets made. So she ends up with this cat, and she takes it up to her apartment, and she's trying to, think about a name. Like, what am I going to name this thing? Like, and reflects on how difficult of a time that she has giving names to things. Like, this is such a big responsibility. And the last time that she had to name something, it took her so long. But that might have been because the last thing that she named was her child when she was in prison, so she had months of just sitting in her cell thinking about it. It decided to name her child Diem, Diem. And I know what you're thinking, Diem, like Carpe Diem? Yeah, I knew as soon as I was released I was going to make my way back here and do everything in my power to find her. Here I am, Carpe Diem. And if you're like me, I was like, Carpe Diem means seize the day, doesn't it? Like, what you mean, girl? You mean like the day you get out of prison, you're gonna like do your best to find your daughter, but like Diem doesn't, like, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, I genuinely, so truly, I feel like I'm missing something here. If you can enlighten me, please do. Cut to our main male love interest. His name is Ledger. He is a Denver Broncos, like, retired professional football player. He only lasted 2 years. His contract expired. It wasn't able to get renewed. He's like 28 years old, but he was from the small town, got the offer, played professional football for 2 years, got his couple milli, you know how that is, moved back to the said small town, opens up his own bar, and like invests it well and does some other stuff with it. Like, he's well off. He's doing good. So we open with him at this bar, working with his bartender / best friend, Roman. This gets revealed much later in the book, but it doesn't really matter if I tell you right now. Roman was also a professional football player for some other team. They were playing together. Ledger like tackled him, broke some bone. So then Roman had to end his football career early, got addicted to like painkillers, ended up completely spending like his entire money that he got from football on drugs. An addict, he lost everything that he had going for him. Ledger, carrying this like guilt almost when he heard about that, helped Roman get back on his feet, sent him to rehab, gave him a job at this bar, and they're best friends now. One of the ways that they celebrate Roman's sobriety is every Friday, Ledger will get him a coffee mug. On this particular Friday, when we're introduced to Ledger, we don't acknowledge the sobriety that these mugs symbolize, but I buy him one every Friday. This is the 96th mug that I've bought him. I should probably stop because his apartment is full of coffee mugs, but I'm too far in to give up now. He's almost at 100 weeks sober, and I've been holding on to that 100th milestone mug for a while now. It's a Denver Broncos mug, his least favorite team. Ledger also, when he goes inside for his shift, Roman's giving him a hard time because he has his fingernails painted. His fingernails are painted by some unnamed 4-year-old. Can we guess who this unnamed 4-year-old is? So he's a family man. He's in tune with his emotions. He's supportive of his friends. He invests his money correctly. I was impressed. So he goes into the bar, and there's a couple that's at the jukebox, and they're giggling to themselves about what's going on. So he goes over and he's like, "What are you guys doing? Are you just fucking with me?" And they're like, "Oh, we would never." It's his parents. His parents are so madly in love with each other. It is so cute. And they're in love with him, right? He's their only son. They're traveling, like they retired a couple years ago. They're in their RV. They just travel around the country, and then they just stop by randomly, unannounced, and visit him. And this is one of those visits, right? It's a very, very cute premise. The other thing to note too about his parents, which I love so much, I thought it's such a cute bit that is like brought up throughout the book, but they make bets on stuff. Like, oh, like, will he remember our anniversary? Will he, I don't know, say X, Y, and Z? Will this happen? Will that happen? Blah, blah, blah. And they just exchange like the same $10 bill back and forth to each other, and it's been the same $10 bill for like 40 years. I love love. I love love, and I love a softy man. He's doing his shift. His parents are there. He's just vibing, hanging out with Roman, hanging out with his parents. This woman walks in. It's a woman he doesn't recognize. It's kind of weird. She looks lost. Like, she looks very, very clearly out of place. She makes her way to the corner of the bar, like of the actual bar. All she orders is a Diet Coke and a water. It's kind of strange. And she's just writing in her notebook, and she's in her own little world. So he approaches her, and he's like, "Hey, like, are you waiting for somebody?" She says, "No, just me. I'm just thirsty." He's got my 2 drinks. And so he takes the hint that she wants to be left alone and does so, but he is just like infatuated with this woman. Like, subconsciously there's something telling him that something's off, or that she's like of concern. He's ignoring it, and he's just like, "Oh my god, she's just like, she's so beautiful. Like, she's just, I wish that there was a photo of her in the museum so I could just stare at her all the time," is like a direct quote. And I hate insta love, don't get me wrong. I absolutely hate insta love. When it's from a woman, when the man falls first, I don't care. I don't fucking care at all. I love that. Drool over a woman. You little peasant, you better beg on your knees for her attention. We cut to chapter 3. We're back to Kenna. Kenna is obviously the mysterious woman at the bar, if you couldn't tell. And she is writing a letter to Scotty, right? Scotty being her ex-boyfriend, Scotty being the guy that she killed in the car accident that she went to prison over, like, manslaughtering. She's writing him a letter, and she's been doing this for a long time. Like, we're in the 300s now. Like, she writes him letters constantly, dude. Which I think would be cute. It's kind of used as a plot device to allow for Colleen to give a recap of, like, historic stuff in the town or historic stuff in their relationship. So she's writing this letter, and I think I would have liked it if not for the following sentence. "I swear, it's like this whole town is one huge Monopoly board. And after you died, someone came along and picked up the board and scrambled all the pieces around." Baby girl, have you ever played Monopoly? You can scramble, like, the houses around, but, like, it's not like the boardwalk is gonna get swip-swapped with the railroad or the power company. The point of why she's saying that, though, is because the bar that she just stumbled into used to be a coffee shop or a bookstore or something that her and Scotty used to go to. And so she's like, "Oh my god, it's so embarrassing. I just, like, walked into this bar, and, like, it shouldn't be that way. Like, this is crazy. Things change so much." Girl, and also I'm like, yo, you didn't recognize that it was a bar before you walked in there? Did you not read the sign? You're really gonna tell me it took you until you literally opened the door and walked into it to realize that it was a bar? So she's writing in this letter, and she's talking about, like, "Oh, I can't be here because if your parents find out, then that's gonna make them hate me more, that I went to a bar before I visited them, and it's this whole problematic thing." And she then starts talking about, like, how she went there because she wanted coffee. And she's thinking that because when she was in prison, she made out with a prison guard. She's like, "It'll make sense in a minute, Scotty." When she made out with the guy, he tasted not like the prison coffee. He tasted like $8 Starbucks coffee with whipped cream and a cherry. What fucking Starbucks is giving y'all cherries? But anyway, you know, he tasted like this really fancy coffee. I kept kissing him, not because I enjoyed the kiss or him or his hand on my waist, but because I missed expensive flavored coffee. And you. I miss expensive coffee. And you. So then she asks Ledger, the bartender, for coffee, right? She downed her Diet Coke, she downed the water, she asks for a coffee, and then she asks, you know, if he has vanilla, or like, do you have caramel sauce, or milk, or whipped cream, and all this other stuff, and he's kind of smart ass, jokes with her that, oh yeah, we've got skim milk in the back. Obviously, it's just like a carafe of like Folgers, like day-old Folgers, but he plays along, makes her a new one, grabs her whipped cream and a cherry, and it's cute, right? He like tries really hard in this moment to like give her this coffee. It's kind of like a flirting thing. Before he does that though, she also falls like insta love for Ledger. I've never seen someone move so fluidly. Like he has 7 arms and 3 brains and they're all going at once. It's mesmerizing watching someone who's so good at what they do. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know that there is anything in this world that I could make look effortless. There are things I want to be good at. I want to be a good mother to my future kids, but mostly to my daughter that I already brought into this world. I want to have a yard that I can plant stuff in, stuff that will flourish and not die. I want to learn how to talk to people without wishing I could retract every word that I said. I want to be good at feeling things when a guy touches my waist. I want to be good at life. I want to make it look effortless, but up until this point, I've made every aspect of my life appear entirely too difficult to navigate. He gives her the coffee. She takes a sip, and it is literally so good that she cries. She cries at his kindness. She cries at how yummy the coffee is, and 26,000 people highlighted the following quote in regards to that. I take a drink of my coffee and close my eyes and cry because life can be so fucking cruel and hard, and I've wanted to quit living it so many times. But then moments like these remind me that happiness isn't some permanent thing that we're all trying to achieve in life. It's merely a thing that shows up every now and then, sometimes in tiny doses that are just substantial enough to keep us going. We cut back to Ledger's perspective, and he's like, I know how to deal with crying children. I do not know how to deal with crying women. So he keeps his distance from her, but like constantly stealing glances, constantly drooling, constantly thinking about how attractive she is for the entire chapter. Like, boy is down bad, like instantly. Once she finishes her coffee and asks what she wants next, and she asks for white wine. He's a little surprised by this, but he gives it to her, and he goes back over to the other side of the bar, and Roman's over there, or Roman tries to make bets on why she's there. It's kind of this game that Roman and Ledger have of when they see somebody who looks out of place at the bar, it's like, oh, are they divorced? Is there a death? They try to guess what the drama is, and he thinks, I don't respond to Roman. I don't feel right guessing her tragedy because I'm hoping it isn't divorce or death or even a bad day. I want good things for her because it seems like she hasn't had a good thing in a long time. As he's watching her, though, he's seeing her kind of eyeing the wine in a weird way, like enough to kind of send alarm bells off. For he, as a bartender who has witnessed a lot of alcoholics, he's like, oh, like she's battling herself with drinking this or not. Like, I'll take it away from her. So he does. He takes it, he dumps it down the sink, and she takes a couple more minutes, and then she ends up just leaving some money and a good tip for him and then walks out. He watches her. He debates if he should follow, but he knows that if he doesn't follow her, that it's gonna drive him crazy. Like, he's gonna always think that she's the one that got away or whatever. So he busts out the door. I left money on the bar. I know. What then? Nothing. You should come back at 11. I don't give her a chance to tell me no or explain why she can't. I go back inside the bar, hoping that my request makes her curious enough to show back up tonight. Okay. We cut back to Kenna's perspective. She walks back to her apartment. She's hanging out with unnamed cat, and she's just kind of reflecting on life. And one of those things being, she's upset that he took the wine away from her. She's like, now he's going to think that I have a problem with alcohol, and I don't. I haven't had alcohol in years because one night of alcohol mixed with a tragedy ruined the last 5 years of my life. And the last 5 years of my life I've led back to this town, and this town makes me nervous. And the only thing that calms my nerves is doing things that make me feel like I'm in control of my life and my decisions. That's why I wanted to turn down the wine. I wanted to order it and then turn it down. And in my note, I said, IDK, bitch, you killed a dude. She does this throughout this entire book. And I hate this woman so much. I cannot begin to explain to you. I hate Kenna. Kenna is the most insufferable character I've ever come across in a book, because all she talks about is how that, like, it was one accident. It was an accident. It ruined my entire life. I made a mistake, and Scotty died. So what? I'm a victim too. You see you next Tuesday. I swear to God. You've got to be kidding me. It just pissed me off so bad. So then she's talking about how she's concerned, though, about people. She's kind of concerned about people recognizing her around town. And it was already risky enough going into the bar because if Scotty's parents, if somebody recognized her and reported back to them, then like they're not going to, she's not even going to get a chance to talk to DM or see DM or anything. They're going to like completely exile her. And she thinks to herself, I didn't live in this town long enough to make many friends outside of Scotty. So I doubt many people even know who I am. I'm sure plenty of them know of me, but it's hard to be recognized when you aren't even missed. So she moved to said small town. I think she was born in Denver, moved to said small town for college. And so she's like, yeah, people probably won't recognize me. Like, I was pretty reclusive. Like, I really only hung out with him, and we were so busy. Like, all we did in our free time was hang out with each other. Like, blah, 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 blah. And then she thinks to herself, prison. I'll never get used to saying that word. The word prison is used 55 times. And the term 5 years, i.e. the 5 years she spent in prison, is used 35 times. I think she gets used to it. I think she gets used to talking about it. So she does make her way back to the bar at 11 o'clock to meet with Ledger. He's a fine dude. She's new in town. She kind of wants to get laid, right? Like, she wants attention. And because he took the wine away from her, now she's thinking of ways that she can kind of get that control back. And so she goes to meet him at the bar with the intention of not leading him on necessarily, but like showing up for this date and then cutting it short. And like, she's in charge of the moment, and like, she's gonna end it when she wants to, and that'll give her the control, the feeling of control that she desires in order to like feel prepared for this confrontation that she's intending to have with Scotty's parents the following day. She's waiting. It takes a long time to close out, and final call and cleaning the bar, and everybody else is out of the bar, and it's literally just her and Ledger that are left. He walks through the double doors with a different shirt on. He's no longer wearing the purple collared shirt with the rolled up sleeves that all the other employees were wearing. He put on a white t-shirt, so simple but so complicated. Okay. He comes to her booth. He sits next to her on the same side of the booth. I hate that. And they're flirting and they're talking. He's like, what's your name? People are gonna know who Kenna is. Like, they're gonna recognize the name. So she intentionally lies, not wanting to be recognized. So she says, my name's Nicole. She defends herself about the wine thing. She's like, I don't have a problem with wine. Explains like why she ordered it and why she looked at it like she did. And then he starts asking her more questions of like, you know, like, who are you? Like, why are you here? Where did you come from? Like, you're so fascinating. I'm just so attracted to you. Like, you're not like, who are you? She, instead of answering, decides to straddle him, gets on top of him, and then she's like, who are you? Goes in to kiss him. Ledger, he says, right before he rips open my past, pulls apart what's left of my heart, drops it on the floor, and then kisses me. People say that you fall in love, but fall is such a sad word when you think about it. Falls are never good. You fall on the ground, you fall behind, you fall to your death. Whoever was the first person to say that they fell in love must have already fallen out of it. Otherwise, they'd have called it something much better. So then she talks about her and Scotty falling in love. Scotty told her halfway through their relationship that he loved her. It was the night that she was supposed to meet his best friend for the first time. But that meeting never happened. I can't remember why. It's been a long time, but his friend had to cancel and Scotty was sad. So I baked him cookies, we smoked a joint, and I gave him head. Best girlfriend ever, until I killed him. But that was 3 months before he would die. I say, God damn. And also, y'all were only together for 6 months. This is a lot of buildup for a guy that you were only with for 6 months, dude. But that was 3 months before he would die. And in the admission of him loving her, he says, I fucking love you, Kenna. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. I miss you all the time, even when we're together. That stuck with me. I miss you all the time, even when we're together. And I thought that was the only thing that stuck with me that night, but I was wrong. Something else stuck with me. A name. Ledger. The best friend who never showed. The best friend I never got to meet. The best friend who just put his tongue in my mouth and his hand up my shirt. And his name in my chest. What the fuck? Hey, what does his name in my chest mean? That would have been like a banger, like, oh my God, that's so crazy. I can't believe that that's who he is. But I was so distracted by the term his name in my chest that like I don't know what the fuck we're even talking about anymore. Also, my little lights came on. Aren't those so cute? My husband put them up the other day. Yeah, it's November 18th, okay? Fuck off. We're doing Christmas early. Look how cute they are. I love my little background so much right now. Anyway, what a stupid book, right? So I was really mad about that. So this fucking bitch. Back to Kenna and why I hate her so much. She realizes right before she and Ledger are about to kiss who he is. And then she still does it anyway. She still kisses him. Knowing that Ledger is her dead boyfriend's best friend, knowing that Ledger doesn't know who she is, still goes for it. So we cut to Ledger's perspective and he's just like drooling over this woman, still like just like insta loving over her. She seems like a quiet person, but not the shy kind of quiet. She's quiet in the fierce way. A storm that sneaks up on you and you don't know it's there until you feel the thunder rattle your bones. She's quiet, but she's said just enough to make me want the rest of her words. She tastes like apples, even though she had coffee earlier, and apples are my favorite fruit. They're probably my favorite food, period, now. Ugh. And now we're getting like a little too cheesy even for my liking, dude. So after their makeup fest, she gets a little skittish. She's like, oh my God, I have to go. She leaves. She's about to have a panic attack on the sidewalk, not really realizing, she already knew, but that she's making out with his best friend. He comes outside and he's like, hey, like, let me take you home. She's a little freaky outy and he's like, are you okay? I will be. Tomorrow's just a big day for me. I'm just nervous. What's tomorrow? A big day for me. She obviously doesn't plan on elaborating, so I nod and respect her privacy. So they go over to his truck on the side of the building, and she sees it and gets kind of weird again, a little standoffish, and he's like, hey, seriously, like, it literally just, I'll take you home. Like, there's no other motive, there's nothing going on, and she's like, yeah, I know, it's okay. He opens the passenger door. They end up making out. They're, like, about to do, like, his hand is in her pants, man. They're about to do other stuff. And they see headlights turn into the alleyway, and it's a police officer. Luckily, they're friends. So he goes up, she's kind of getting her stuff together. She's getting all situated, and he's talking to the cop and plays it off and blocks the view so that the cop doesn't see who she is. It's kind of awkward. He goes to take her home. He takes her to the apartment, turns off the truck, opens her door for her, like such a gentleman. He opened the door for her earlier. He says, I have no idea what to say. I don't know where to put my hands because I feel like I should be hugging her goodbye, but it seems like she doesn't want me near her now. I slip my hands into the pockets of my jeans. I want to see you again. I'm not. No, thank you. She says it so politely that I can't even be upset. And then he watches her walk into her apartment and leaves. Doesn't have a phone number, has no idea who she is. He just wants to know more about her, and that's all that he knows. We go back to Kenna's perspective, and she's writing another letter to Scotty. And again, plot device to learn about history. So the reason that she got so freaked out about Ledger's truck is because Scotty had borrowed the truck to pick her up for her and Scotty's first date. She had been working at the equivalent of like a Dollar Tree, so like a dollar store, and he came through her line and bought a plate. He came through her line again, bought another plate, and another plate, and another plate. And she's like, you know you can buy more than one item, right? He's like, yeah, I was working up the courage to ask you out, though. So she's like, I'm sorry, it's company policy, like, we can't date customers. He calls over another employee. He returns said plates. He goes back up to her, and he's like, hey, I'm not a customer anymore. Like, what time do you get off? She says 7. She's excited for their date. He leaves. He shows up at 7:30 in Ledger's truck because his car had broken down or something. It was in the shop. And also because he had just broken up with his girlfriend. She's like, you had a girlfriend? Used to. What do you mean? I knew I was going to ask you out when I bought the third plate. Like, I knew I had to break up with her. Like, it had been coming for a long time and like blah, 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 blah. So yeah, he was late because he broke up with his girlfriend to be with her, which is like supposed to be romantic, I guess. I don't know, dude. I was like, do I like it? Do I hate it? I don't know. I can't decide. But so she remembers seeing Ledger's truck there from that first date, and so it kind of holds this like weird place in her heart. And when Ledger said his name against my lips earlier tonight, I almost said Scotty's Ledger, but that question would have been pointless because I knew in that instance that of course he was your Ledger. How many Ledgers could there possibly be? I've never met one before. I was overwhelmed with questions, but Ledger kissed me and it ripped me in half because I wanted to kiss him back. But even more than that, I wanted to ask him questions about you. I wanted to say, what was Scotty like as a child? What did you love about him? Did he ever talk about me? Do you still talk to his parents? Have you met my daughter? Can you help me put all the pieces of my broken life back together? What was Scotty like as a child? Shut the fuck up. That is so sad. Because they only dated for like 6 months when he was like 23, I think. Oh my god. My guy, that was so sad. I am not good with like young death in that way, or like regrets about people like passing away. That like this book had me fucked up in some parts that we'll get into. Oh my god. She then goes into detail about how she felt like a cheater for a couple of reasons, right? It's his best friend, and then Ledger didn't know who she was, like she was lying about her identity, and it meant something to her, like she felt something, like yeah, she had kissed the security guard dude, but like it didn't mean anything to her, and it didn't make her feel something quite like kissing Ledger did. Feels all these like really bad feelings that she's trying to express to Scotty, and like apologizing for all of this and crying her eyes out. Cut back to Ledger's chapter. He says, I didn't park in the garage when I got home last night. DM likes to wake up to look out her window in the mornings to make sure that I'm home. And when I leave my truck in the garage, Grace says that it makes DM sad. So, for context of what we're working with here, Scotty and Ledger grew up across the street from each other. Scotty's parents own the house. And then when Scotty passed away and Kenna had her kid, they adopted DM, right? Like they took custody of DM. Ledger's parents lived obviously across the street. They retired like 5-6 years ago to get in the whole RV thing and do their retirement trips around the country. And Ledger at the same time had just gotten out of like NFL and bought their house, moved back in. And by the time that he came back, DM was only a couple months old. And so he steps in as like this almost surrogate son, uncle, caretaker situation for DM and Grace and the dad, where he just has this like huge role in DM's life. And he just loves this little girl so much. He's like very involved with her life. Parents are over there visiting, and he's like, oh cool, whatever. His parents are about to leave. As per usual, they just like drop in and drop out like constantly. So he's saying goodbye to the parents and talking about how he has t-ball practice because he's the coach for DM's school. He goes over to visit. Scotty's parents are named Patrick. That's the dad's name. I finally found it. And then Grace. Ledger goes over to their house to pick up DM for t-ball practice. He's kind of BSing with Grace and Patrick and talking about how her 5th birthday is coming up. And Patrick is saying that she wants to get a swing set. She wants a swing set, like one of those ridiculous big ones, like the one that you used to have in your backyard. Ledger says, I still have it. You do? Where? It's in the shed in pieces, but I can help put it back together. Like it shouldn't be a problem. And Grace says, you think it's still in good shape? Well, it should be. I took it apart. I failed to tell her that Scotty is the reason that I took it apart. I got angry every time I looked at it after he died. It'll come back later, don't worry. He picks DM up, they go to t-ball practice. It's cute, it's banter, it's with like a 4-year-old child, so I don't really know what you expect. It's just supposed to like prove that he's such a good caretaker, right? He's a family man. And then he picks up Roman, because Roman, also again, his buddy, helps him coach. The only reason that he helps me coach is because none of the other parents would do it, and since he works for me, I added it to his schedule. He's the only person I know who gets paid to coach t-ball, but he doesn't seem to feel guilty about it. And it's just cute. We cut back to Kenna, and in chapter 9, and she is just applying for a bunch of jobs, but it is incredibly difficult to get a job as a felon and with somebody who doesn't have like hardly any work experience, right? She was 21 when she went to prison, and so she just has nothing. The only other experience she had was that she worked at the dollar store for a couple of years, and then the whole like felony record thing is just very, very difficult. She ends up at a grocery store, and they're hiring for grocery baggers. It's not full-time, but we usually leave those spots open for teenagers with special needs. Oh, well, I don't want to take a job from anyone. No, it's not that. We don't have many applicants because of the low hours, but we really are in need of part-time help. It's about 20 hours a week. I can do it until someone with special needs applies. I could really use the money. Why is this like the 5th fucking book that has used like special needs people as like a fucking crutch to build character or like rapport or like humanity within the main character? Are we talking about like just like inclusion? Colleen did the same thing in Too Late, where she included an autistic guy that she went to college with, and it was just this like plot device that was used in like one particular scene. The character that's about to come up, she's at least like kind of reoccurring throughout the book, so I feel a little bit better about it, but like So she continues to press on to this grocery store lady. She's like, hey, seriously, like, I don't care that it's part-time. I don't care how much it pays. Like, I just need a job. Like, I'm willing to do anything. Discloses that she has a criminal record. The lady doesn't care. She's like, cool, I just want help. Like, she's really nice. Ends up offering her a job. So as she's filling out the job application, Ledger is checking out, and he's checking out with like a bunch of snacks and a bunch of Gatorades, and she asks him what it's for. He says that he coaches t-ball. She instantly is like, oh my god, he has kids, like he has a wife, like I've been flirting with this dude, like I was making out with a dude that's like married. But then she's also like, hey, get the fuck out of here, like you have tattoos and you look like a bad boy and you work at a bar, and like I don't want her to not hire me because I'm talking to you. Okay. She goes back to the grocery store girl and she's like, oh, Ledger Ward, like, are you guys dating? And she plays dumb about it. Whatever. Everybody loved Ledger because he's just a little hottie-toddy dude. But Kenna, obviously being from prison, had no idea that he's this attractive, super rich guy that played in the NFL and has no idea about anything about him. And so she asks the grocery store lady, she's like, hey, does he have a wife and kids? Like, what's going on with his story? She learns that he's single and that he, like, takes care of a niece or something, but that he doesn't have any kids of his own. And Kenna puts it together in her head, that means that he's taking care of Diem. So she like rushes outside in hopes that she can see Diem in Ledger's truck. Ledger's already gone though. I debate going straight to the t-ball field, but I need to do this right. I want to speak with Patrick and Grace first. Then we cut to chapter 10 from Ledger's perspective. He's on the t-ball field, just more camaraderie and a bunch of page filler about talking about how good of a person that he is. He takes Diem to McDonald's after she begs for it, and it's super cute. She says that she doesn't want to do t-ball anymore, and he's like, it's commitment, you have to do what you promise, and like blah 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 blah, some cute life lessons that are supposed to mean something. And then she randomly asks, when is mom getting a bigger car? She drives a minivan. How big of a car does she need? No, not Nana, my mom. Skylar said that my mom never comes to t-ball games, and I told her that she will when she gets a bigger car. I stopped wiping her hands. She never brings up her mother. This is twice in one day that we've rushed the conversation. Who told you that your mom needed a bigger car? Nana. She said that my mom's car isn't big enough, and that's why I live with her and No-No. No-No is her grandpa, by the way. Nana and No-No, it's grandma and grandpa. That's confusing. I shake my head and throw the wipes in a sack. I don't know, ask your Nana. Turns out, Diem had asked the grandma why she doesn't live with her mother, and she didn't know what to say, and so she said, you live with us because your mom doesn't have a big enough car to, like, take all of us and to visit. So she has to wait until she gets a bigger car so that she can travel for all of us to fit in. Well, it's kind of cute, actually. So they kind of play it off, and this whole mom thing getting brought up, though, is like kind of alarming to them because they have never once brought up Kenna. Like, never once explained anything about her mom, and they try to avoid talking about, like, familial units in general. As far as, like, Diem is concerned, like, she's not missing anybody in her life. Like, a mom and dad aren't words that she's ever really, like, learned or been taught. She's just had Nana, No-No, and Uncle freaking Ledger, you know what I mean? She never needed anybody else, and that was kind of how they, like, wanted to keep it. Back to chapter 11, to Kenna's perspective, and she's reflecting how I've never even seen a picture of Diem. I don't know if she looks like me or Scotty. Are her eyes blue or brown? Is her smile honest like her father's? Does she laugh like me? Is she happy? They started fighting for custody the day that they were told that I was pregnant. The baby didn't even have fully developed lungs, but they were already fighting for its first breath. I lost the custody battle before Diem was even born. There aren't many rights a mother has when she's sentenced to several years in prison. The judge said that because of the nature of our situation and the duress I'd caused to Scotty's family, he could not, in good conscience, honor my request for visitation rights. Nor would he force Scotty's parents to maintain the relationship between my daughter and me while I was in prison. So she had nothing. She had absolutely nothing. She knew that they were kind people. Oh, that's gonna make me cry. She didn't fight them taking Diem. She couldn't afford it, right? She had no means to, but because Scotty was such a good guy, Scotty was such, like, a phenomenal person. It's talked about by Kenna, and it's talked about by Ledger that, like, when he passed away, and you know how sometimes people do that where they, like, talk more highly about the person than they should to, like, you know, honor them. And they were like, no, like, he really was, like, he was this light of everybody's life, and he made everybody feel so seen and taken care of, and he was such a good man. And so Kenna was like, if they could raise him to be such a good man, then they will raise Diem to be a good person too. Part of her was so excited for Diem to, like, have such good parents, knowing how good that Scotty turned out. Okay. When she got out of prison, she had social media creeped on absolutely everybody that she could. Like every friend of Scotty's that she could remember, on Grace, on Patrick, on everybody, and she couldn't find any pictures of DM. Like there's no sign of her on the internet whatsoever. Like everybody's profiles are like so super secret. And she thinks to herself, time heals all wounds, right? Except I didn't leave them with a simple wound. I left them with a casualty, one so heartbreaking that there's a possibility it will never be forgiven. It's hard to not cling to hope, though, when all I've been able to do or look forward to is this moment. I'm more nervous in this moment than I was in the courtroom 5 years ago. I grip the rubber starfish tightly in my hand. It's the only toy that they had for sale at the gas station next door to my apartment. I could have had the cab driver take me to Target or Walmart, but they're both in the opposite direction of where I'm hoping DM still lives, and I can't afford all that much cab fare. She uses the last of her money after she gets a job, right? She has an apartment, she has a job, she feels that she's like adequate enough now to go and visit Grace and Patrick and be like, hey, I'm getting my life together, I'm getting on the right foot, I want to meet my daughter. She pays for the cab to take her over to Scotty's house. Again, still where the parents live, it's the same house. As she's on the way there, though, I don't want them to ask me to leave before I can even plead my case. In a perfect world, they'll open their front door for me and allow me to reunite with my daughter that I've never held. In a perfect world, their son would still be alive. I wonder what I'll see in their eyes when they find me at their front door. Will it be shock? Hatred? How much does Grace despise me? I try to put myself in Grace's shoes sometimes. Trigger warning. The next part, it's not necessarily triggering, it's just like so ungodly sad. I try to put myself in Grace's shoes sometimes. I try to imagine the hatred that she holds for me, what it must feel like from her perspective. Sometimes I lie in bed and close my eyes and try to justify all the reasons this woman is keeping me from knowing my daughter so that I don't hate her back. I think, Kenna, imagine that you're Grace. Imagine you have a son, a beautiful young man that you love more than life, more than the afterlife. And he's handsome, and he's accomplished. But most importantly, he's kind. Everyone tells you this. Other parents wish their children could be more like your son. You smile because you're proud of him. You're so proud of him, even when he brings home his new girlfriend, the one that you heard moaning too loud in the middle of the night, the girlfriend you saw looking around the room while everyone else was praying over dinner, the girlfriend you caught smoking at 11 at night on your back patio, but you didn't say anything. You just hoped your perfect son would outgrow her soon. Imagine you get a phone call from your son's roommate asking if you know where he is. He was supposed to show up for work early that day, but for whatever reason, he didn't show. Imagine your worry because your son shows. He always shows. Imagine he doesn't answer his cell phone when you call to see why he didn't show. Imagine you start to panic as the hours stretch on. Normally you can feel him, but you can't feel him today. You feel full of fear and empty of pride. Imagine you start to make phone calls. You call his college, you call his employer, and you'd even call his girlfriend you don't much care for if only you knew her number. Imagine you hear a car door slam and you breathe a sigh of relief only to fall to the floor when you see the police at your door. Imagine hearing things like, I'm sorry, and accident, and car wreck, and didn't make it. Imagine yourself not dying in that moment. Imagine being forced to go on, to live through that awful night, to wake up the next day, to be asked to identify his body, his lifeless body, a body that you created, breathed life into, grew inside you, taught to walk and talk and run and be kind to others. Imagine touching his cold, cold face, your tears falling into the plastic bag that he's tucked into, your scream stuck in your throat, silent like the screams you've heard in nightmares, and yet you still live somehow. Somehow you go on without the life that you made. You grieve. You're too weak to even plan his funeral. You keep wondering why your perfect son, your kind son, would be so reckless. You're devastated, but your heart keeps beating over and over, reminding you of all the heartbeats that your son will never feel. Imagine that it gets even worse. Imagine that. Imagine that when you think you're at rock bottom, you're introduced to a whole new cliff that you get to fall off of when you're told that your son wasn't driving the car that was going too fast on gravel. Imagine being told that the wreck was her fault. The girl who smoked the cigarette and didn't close her eyes during dinner prayer and moaned too loud in your quiet house. Imagine being told that she was careless and so unkind with the life that you grew. Imagine being told that she left him there, fled, they said. Imagine being told that they found her the next day in her bed, hung over, covered in mud and gravel and your kind son's blood. Imagine being told that your perfect son had a perfect pulse and might have lived a perfect life if only he could have had that wreck with a perfect girl. Imagine finding out it didn't have to be this way. He wasn't even dead. 6 hours they estimated that he had lived. Several feet he had crawled, searching for you. needing your help, bleeding, dying for hours. Imagine finding out that the girl who moaned too loud and smoked a cigarette on your patio at 11 o'clock at night could have saved him. One phone call that she didn't make, 3 numbers that she never dialed, 5 years she served for his life like you didn't raise him for 18, watch him flourish on his own for 4, and maybe could have gotten 50 more years with him had she not cut them short. Imagine having to go on after that. Imagine that girl, the one you hoped your son would grow out of. Imagine after all the pain she caused you, she decides to show back up in your life. Imagine she has the nerve to knock on your door. Imagine she smiles in your face, asks about her daughter, expects to be part of the tiny little beautiful life that your son miraculously left behind. Just imagine it. Imagine having to look into the eyes of the girl who left your son to crawl several feet during his death while she took a nap in her bed. Imagine what you would say to her after all this time. Imagine all the ways that you could hurt her back. It's easy to see why Grace hates me. I'm supposed to feel bad for Kenna? I'm, as the reader, supposed to be on Kenna's side. Maybe not in this moment, right? I get it. I get the point of tension and like not likable characters, and then maybe they grow on you and like whatever. There is nothing that happens in this book that redeems Kenna from this moment. I don't give a fuck. There's obviously plot changes later that like happen, blah blah blah, whatever. We'll get there. The feeling that I have in this moment after reading that, I can't imagine. Despite this like self-reflection, self-awareness, she still shows up at their house. The cab driver drops her off. She gets outside and she's holding this starfish, and she hesitates a little bit, right? Because she's like a little concerned. Not enough to not be there, but she's still a little concerned. And so she sits down on the curb across the street, and she's kind of crying and thinking about things. Ledger shows up over her shoulder, and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here, Nicole? Like, what are you doing here, Nicole?" He's like, "Why are you looking at that house?" And he realizes in that moment who she is. Realizes that it's Kenna. And he doesn't say it, but it's like internally like, "You fucking bitch." And so Kenna, so he tries to pick her up and take her inside of his house because he's like, "Don't you fucking bother them. Like you've done enough to them. Like I can't believe that you would even have like the gall to even show up right now." So he goes to try and like push her away. He like drags her into his house, and he's like lecturing her, and he's like threatening to call the cops and like all this other stuff. And he's like, "I'm gonna pull my truck inside the garage. You're gonna get in the car. We're gonna leave so that they don't even have to see you. They don't even have to think about you. Like, I can't believe that you would ever even do this." Like, da 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 da. He goes outside to go and get his car, and she makes a run for it. She runs across the street. She's banging on the doors. She's trying to look in the windows. She's banging on the windows, just screaming like, "Let me see my daughter. Let me see my daughter. Let me see my daughter." They never open the door. Ledger goes over and, again, hauls her like over his shoulder and throws her in the car, takes her home, and is just pissed off beyond belief. As one would be. I cannot even begin to fathom. He's driving Kenna home, and in the following chapter we get Ledger's POV, Ledger's point of view. And this is where he talks about what I said earlier. It's typical for people to be praised in death. Heralded to the point of heroism sometimes, but nothing anyone ever said about Scotty was embellished for the sake of remembering him fondly. He was everything everyone said about him. Nice, funny, athletic, honest, charismatic, a good son, a great friend. Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could have traded places with him in life and in death. I'd give up the life that I've been living in an instant if it meant that he could have just one day with Diem. He's like, she was driving when she shouldn't have been. She was speeding. She was drinking. She flipped the car. And she left. She left Scotty there to die. She walked home and crawled into bed because she thought she could get away with it. He's dead because she was scared she'd get in trouble. And now she wants forgiveness? I can't think about the details of Scotty's death right now. Not with her sitting next to me in the truck, because I'd rather be dead than allow her the satisfaction of knowing Diem. If it means driving us both off a bridge, I might just be vengeful enough to do that right now. Okay, hey, edge of my seat, by the way, as I was reading this, I was like, oh my god, I hate this bitch, but like, I'm feeling a lot. Ledger's being great. Like, what a crazy thing to say. I was all about this book, okay? She's staring out the window, unresponsive. She may be crying. I don't know. I don't fucking care. I don't. She isn't the girl I met last night. The girl doesn't exist. She was pretending with me, and I fell right into her trap. Patrick expressed concern several months ago when we found out that she had been released. He thought this might happen, that she might show up wanting to meet DM. I even put a Ring camera on the front of my house that points at their front yard. It's how I knew that someone was sitting on the curb. I told Patrick that he was silly to worry. She wouldn't show up, not after what she did. DM looks like her. I assume she did, since I didn't see much of Scotty in DM's features, but until tonight I had no idea just how much that she resembled her mother. They have the same reddish shade of brown hair, straight and flat, not a wave or curl in sight. She has Kenna's eyes. Maybe that's why I saw red flags last night. My subconscious recognized her before I could. When Kenna's eyes slide over to mine, I feel a tug of disappointment inside of me. DM looks so much like her when she's sad. It's like I'm looking into the future at who DM is going to be someday. I don't like that the one person I dislike most in this world reminds me of the person that I love the most. They get to her apartment, and Kenna says, I didn't know you before I showed up at your bar last night. I swear, I don't care about last night. I care about DM. That's it. I watch a tear as it skates down her jaw. I hate that I know what those tears taste like. I hate that part of me wants to reach over and wipe it away. I wonder if she cried as she was walking away from Scotty that night. She moves with a graceful sadness, leaning forward, pressing her face into her hands. Her movements fill my truck with the scent of her shampoo. It smells like fruit. Apples. I rest my elbow on my door frame and lean away from her, covering my mouth and my nose with my hand. I look out my window, not wanting to know anything else about her. I don't want to know what she smells like, what she sounds like, what her tears look like, what her pain makes me feel like. They don't want you in her life, Kenna. She's my daughter. DM is their daughter. Your rights were terminated. Get the fuck out of my truck and then do us all a favor and go back to Denver. Fuck you, Letcher. The sting of agony in her voice makes me flinch internally, but I remain as stoic as possible on the outside. Her words weren't even a yell. They were just a quiet and piercing statement. She slams my truck door and then slaps my window with both of her palms. Fuck you. I don't know what I expected. I've had this vision of her in my head all these years. A girl with no remorse for what she's done. A mother with no attachment to a child that she brought into the world. 5 years of preconceived yet solid notions aren't easy to let go of. Kenna has been one way and one way only in my mind. Unremorseful, uninvolved, uncaring, unworthy. I can't reconcile the emotional turmoil she seems to suffer from not being a part of DM's life with the lack of regard that she held for Scotty's life. I drive away while thinking of a million things I should have said, a million questions I don't have answers to. Why didn't you call for help? Why did you leave him there? Why do you think you deserve to cause another upheaval in the lives you've already destroyed? Why do I still want to hug you? In the following chapter, chapter 13, we're from Kenna's perspective. She is going up her stairs and she runs into a girl with Down syndrome. She's smiling and at me adorably. Like, this isn't the worst day of my life. She's wearing the same type of work shirt that Amy had on at the grocery store. She must work there. Amy said that they give grocery bagger positions to people with special needs. And so then she goes on to befriend the girl. Her name is Lucy. She goes by Lady Diana. I still don't understand the point of the character. I'm not gonna lie. It feels really weird. I'm not comfortable with it, but whatever. They're friends, or they try to befriend. She just wants to cry. Lady Diana breaks into her house and just busts through the door and goes through her fridge and pets her cat and keeps asking her questions when she doesn't want to be asked stuff, and then says that she'll play with her later. Finally, Lady Diana leaves. Kenna is alone in her house. She's writing another letter to Scotty. I wish I could tell you what our daughter looks like, but I still have no idea. I'm not here to take them from her, but I don't think Ledger or your parents have any idea what it's like to carry a human inside of you for months, only to have that tiny human ripped away from you before you could even get to meet them. I get it. I'm sad for her. Don't get me wrong. If it was literally any other scenario of a pregnant woman having her child ripped away from her arms, I think I would have significantly more empathy or sympathy or give a shit, and I don't care. You killed a man. You ripped a life away from somebody. You can call it involuntary manslaughter. You can call it an accident. You can call it whatever you want. I don't care. Personally, I get why people would have felt differently about this book, and why people would have been like, oh my god, it's so touching, and she's just a misunderstood soul. Not me, bitch. Not me. You drank and drove. You deserve all the bad shit that comes to you. I don't give a fuck. That's karma. Sorry, that's karma. Not my problem. I don't care. Is that insensitive of me? Maybe. I don't know. Back to Ledger's perspective. He's talking to Grace and Patrick, and obviously they heard what was going on. They were able to play it off and keep DM removed from it, but they're calling him and being like, what does she want? Like, what does she want to do? Grace isn't strong enough to face Kenna. Patrick may not be strong enough either, but Patrick has always made sure to at least pretend to be as strong as Grace needs him to be. He'd never act this distraught in front of Grace. He saves this side of himself for the moments Scotty's death gets to be too much. The moments he needs to escape and cry alone in my backyard. Sometimes I can see them both start to unravel. It always happens in February, the month of Scotty's birth, but then DM's birthday comes around in May and breathes new life back into them. So he reassures Patrick that, like, Kenna doesn't have any money. He doesn't think, like, she can't afford a lawyer. Like, she's not going to be trying for custody or anything. Like, she's not going to be able to afford a lawyer or any of this other stuff. And Patrick pushes back and he's like, cool, but, like, we're still going to try to get a restraining order. Like, we can't do this. Like, this is too scary. Like, we're too worried about this. This is stressful. We're not going to be able to be comfortable until we know that she's gone. Cut to that night. He is at the bar working. He's out of sorts, obviously, reflecting on, like, the craziness that is the day and how he got lied to by Kenna / Nicole. And Roman calls him out for it. Roman's like, dude, what the fuck is your problem? Like, you are just, like, you're slowing us down. Like, what's going on? He tells Roman what's going on. He's like, yeah, that girl that came by last night, that's Kenna. Kenna showed up at the doorstep. She tried to take DM, or she wanted to see him. And Roman says, wow, did she know who you were last night? I still don't know the answer to that, so I just shrug. She didn't seem surprised to see me outside my house earlier. She just seemed upset. She showed up and tried to meet DM today, and I fucked up, Roman. Patrick and Grace don't need this. Does she have any rights as a parent? Her rights were terminated because of the length of her prison sentence. We've just been hoping that she wouldn't show up and want to be a part of her life. I mean, they feared it. We all did. I guess we just sort of assumed that we'd have some kind of warning. I mean, to be fair, the woman gave birth to DM. I think that was your warning. What's the plan? Are they going to let DM meet her mother now that they know that she wants to be involved? It would be too hard on Patrick and Grace if Kenna were in their lives. How's Kenna going to take that? I don't really care how Kenna feels. No grandparents should be forced to have to set up visitation with their son's murderer. Murderer? That's a bit dramatic. Her actions led to Scotty's death, sure, but the girl isn't some cold-blooded murderer. I always thought they were a little too harsh on her. Roman didn't know me back then when Scotty died. He only knows the story, but if he were around 5 years ago to see how it affected everyone, and he still somehow managed to say what he just said, I'd have punched him for it. But he's just being Roman, devil's advocate, uninformed. How long ago was this? It's been a few hours. You aren't worried about her? Who, DM? I'm talking about Kenna. Does she have family here? Friends? Or did you drop her off alone after telling her to fuck off? I stand up and brush the back of my jeans. I know what he's getting at, but it's not my problem. At least that's what I keep telling myself. Maybe you should go and check on her, he suggests. I'm not going to check on her. You're better than this. She's responsible for the accidental death of someone she was in love with, as if that isn't hard enough. She went to prison for it, and she was forced to give up her own child. She finally shows back up, hoping to meet her, and you do God knows what with her in your truck, and you prevent her from meeting her daughter, and then you tell her to fuck off. No wonder you've been slamming shit around all night. You're the reason I'm not dead in a ditch somewhere, Ledger. You gave me a chance when everyone else gave up on me. You have no idea how much I look up to you for that. But it's really hard to look up to you right now. You're acting like an asshole. So Ledger reflects on this commentary from Roman, and he thinks to himself, what would Scotty do? Like, what would Scotty, the kind-hearted, loving soul, what would he do? Scotty would have checked on her. And so that's what Ledger does. Ledger drives across town to go to Kenna's apartment to go and see if she's okay. And so begins my hatred for this fucking book. 97 pages, 31% before I started to lose my mind, which is honestly, like, to be frank, that's a record. So he shows up at the apartments to check on Kenna, and Kenna's outside with Lady Diane. They're playing with sparklers. He's thinking to himself, like, oh, like, she doesn't give a shit. Like, she's out here, she's just playing with fireworks and having, like, a good old time. But the second that Lady Diane turns around, Kenna is crying and, like, clearly overwhelmed and, like, expressing this, like, utter sadness. And so it's getting to Ledger, and he's like, okay, maybe she's not this, like, heartless monster that I've, like, painted her out to be. Like, maybe she genuinely feels bad about what's going on. He's, like, waiting and staring at them, and then eventually when Kenna notices him, she comes over to his truck, and she's hopeful, thinking, like, oh, maybe he was able to, like, forgive me or talk some sense into Patrick and Grace. Are you gonna be okay? Are you here because you're afraid that I might unalive myself? Am I worried that you aren't in a good headspace? Yeah, I am. I wanted to make sure that you were okay. That's not it. You're worried that if I end my life, you'll be left feeling guilty, that you've been so unbearably cruel to me. That's why you came back. You don't care if I actually unalive myself. You just don't want to be the impetus of my decision. You did it. You checked on me. Your conscience is clear now. Goodbye. I'm not sure I could be on her side even if I wanted to be. This whole situation contains so many nooks and crannies and corners. I get the feeling choosing sides is going to be the downfall of us all. Which again, what the f*** does that even mean? This whole situation contains so many nooks and crannies and corners? I'm assuming, right? Because like nooks and crannies and corners that you're saying there's like multiple sides of like each of those little nooks. Are we just making up analogies, similes, metaphors? I don't know whatever the fuck type of literary device that is. Hello? That could have been phrased so much better and so much more differently. Again, it's like every time it's like Colleen Hoover's like trying to be so deep and like convey this emotion of blah blah blah, but she tries too hard and it takes me out of the moment where I'm just like, you could have taken that out. You could have literally just said, I couldn't have been sure if I was on her side if I wanted to be. I get the feeling choosing sides is going to be the downfall of us all. You didn't need the weirdly poetic bullshit sentence in the middle there that just confuses me. That's not the kind of author that you are. This isn't the kind of book that is. And so it just like, it takes me out of the moment so bad. But that sentence, I think the frustration of like overly flowery language for no reason that doesn't make any sense pissed me off enough to make me give up on this book. Like I'd DNF this shit if it wasn't for you guys. It's instant forgiveness. Him saying that means that he is on her side. So we went 100 pages of him going to bat for this family and being angry at this woman for like manslaughtering his friend, to him instantly being on her side and like trying to forgive her and now trying to earn her forgiveness for being so unnecessarily cruel to her. Am I missing something? I feel like I'm crazy. I feel like maybe I'm just a vindictive bitch, but that couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. I'm calling it quits there for the night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Day number 2. Welcome back to myself. If you've watched any of my videos before, I have to film these in like multiple days or over the course of a couple of days because I got a full-time job. You know, this is just kind of like the fun thing that I do in the evenings, and I just, as much as I would love to spend hours on end filming, it's just not really an option. I'm starting, like, I literally just walked through the door. So I should be able to film hopefully the rest of this book tonight. So let's go. We open in chapter 15. We're back in Kenna's perspective. And this stupid bitch, I think this is the chapter. We just got the position flip-flop thing coming from Ledger where he's like, oh, maybe she is the victim. Like, oh my God, like, maybe we have been too hard on her. And so now begins the campaign of the Let's Make You Like Kenna campaign. It didn't work for me. It made me feel sad, but it didn't excuse anything that happened. So in chapter 15, Kenna is reflecting on her relationship that she had with her mother, opening saying, here's the thing. It shouldn't matter if a mother isn't perfect. It shouldn't matter if she's made one big, horrible mistake in the past or lots of little ones. If she wants to see her child, she should be allowed to see her, even if it's just once. And then she goes on to detail how neglectful that her mother was and how there were 2 times in her life that she went into the foster system. The first time was like a couple of weeks, I think, and then the other one was a little bit later, and it was for an entire year. In that entire year, she spent with a woman named Mona. Mona wasn't anything spectacular, but the simple fact that she watched movies with me every now and then, cooked dinner every night, and did laundry was more than my own mother ever did. Mona was average. She was quiet. She wasn't very funny. She wasn't even all that fun, but she was present. She made me feel taken care of. I realized during the year that I was with Mona that I didn't need my mother to be spectacular or even great. I just wanted my mother to be adequate enough to not have the state intervene in her parenting. That isn't too much for a child to ask for a parent who gave them life. Just be adequate, keep me alive, don't leave me alone. And then she goes on to talk about how once she turned 18, she just stopped talking to her mom. I thought I'd never speak to her again, not because we had some huge falling out, but because our relationship was a burden. And I think we both felt like we'd been set free when that relationship broke down. And it's just sad. And it talks about like the first time when she had reached back out to her mother was when she was in prison, right? So she stopped when she was 18. I think she was like 21 or 22 when she ended up having the baby, which again, these like the dates at the time makes no sense. But it had been a little while since she had talked to her mom. And so she calls her from prison. She's like 8 months pregnant. She's like, Mom, I need you to do me a favor. Like, I need you to petition for visitation rights so you can see the baby. No sympathy, no empathy. I realized in that moment that she was glad she had gotten rid of me and had no intention of being a grandmother. I expected it. I was just hoping that she'd grown a conscience in the years since I'd seen her. Now you'll know how I felt every time the state took you from me. I went through so much to get you back both times, and you never appreciated it. You never even said thank you. So then her mom leaves the prison, and she was stuck with the baby alone. She never talked to her mom again after that. She like could not fathom this idea that her mom wanted to thank you for being a shitty enough mom to get her kid taken away. But that doesn't matter to Kenna because she's like, yeah, but like, I want to be present. I should be present in my daughter's life. Just so fucking irritating. Chapter 16, from Ledger's perspective, he and Patrick, Scotty's dad, are working on building that playground thing in the backyard, like the big old swing set for Diem's birthday. They haven't really talked about what happened yesterday with the whole situation with Kenna. And Ledger says, I can tell the silence on that subject is about to end because he stops working and says, welp. That was always the word that Patrick uses before he's about to start a conversation that he doesn't want to have, or if he's about to say something he knows he shouldn't say. I picked up on it when I was just a teenager. He'd walk into Scotty's room to tell me it was time for me to go home, but he'd never say what he intended to say. He would just talk around it. He'd tap on the door and say, welp, I guess you two've got school tomorrow. That's such a dad thing. I just thought that was really, really cute. They're talking about how they are going to be filing the restraining order against Kenna because they don't know what she's going to do, and they're afraid that, she's going to kidnap Diem or do something reckless. And Ledger's thinking to himself, I know her better than he thinks I do, but I'll never admit that. Patrick also might be right. I know what it's like to kiss her, but I have no idea who she is as a human. She seems to have good intentions, but I'm sure Scotty thought the same thing about her before she walked away from him when he needed her the most. So my guy, are you going to bat for this woman or not? Because I need to know if I like you or not, bro. Like, you got to make this more clear. So he tries to stick up for Kenna, and he's like, well, like, what if she just wants to see the kid? Like, what if, blah, 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 devil's advocate thing. Patrick gets pissed, rightfully so, and he's like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear about it. Like, she's not going to see Diem. Like, I don't care. We're not doing that. I'm not subjecting Grace to that. I'm not subjecting myself to that. Like, we're not doing it. Ledger internally then thinks, I get what Patrick is saying completely, but I also know that after getting to know Kenna just over the last couple of days, the hatred that I had for her is starting to turn into something else. Maybe that hatred is turning into empathy. I feel like that could possibly happen to Patrick and Grace if they gave her a chance. My note just says, fuck this guy. You're about to sabotage a lifelong relationship, a very close relationship that you've developed with these people after their kid died. Just throw it away for some pussy, dude. You've got to be shitting me. And then it goes into a really sad conversation where Patrick and Ledger are like hanging out, and he's asking, do you think Scotty wished that I was different? Patrick asks. What do you mean? You're a great dad. I've worked in an office crunching sales numbers my whole life. Sometimes I'd wondered if he ever wished that I was something better, like a firefighter or an athlete. I wasn't the type of dad that he could brag about. Okay, so that instantly made me cry, even rereading it now. So Ledger goes on to say, like, no, like, admired you, he respected you, like, you always came home and you were the best dad ever, and like, you were a constant in his life, and that's all he wanted. Like, he wanted to settle down and have the family and have the life that you had. Like, he loved you. Patrick pushes back and he's like, thank you, even if it's not true. So then he says, it's true. I say, reassuring him, but Patrick seems sad. I try to think of the lighter stories about Scotty. One time, we were sitting inside the jungle gym, and out of nowhere, this pigeon landed in the front yard. It was only 3 or 4 feet from us. Scotty looked at it and said, is that a fucking pigeon? And I don't know why. Maybe because we were both high, but we laughed so hard at that. We laughed until we cried. And for years, up until he died, every single time that we would see something that didn't make sense, Scotty would say, is that a fucking pigeon? Patrick laughs. That's why he always said that? And then Patrick, he laughs until he cries. And then he just cries. Ledger walks away to let Patrick feel his feelings and stuff. And it's so sad. I cannot imagine, dude. He like just sheer and utter sadness. He ends his chapter by saying, I want so badly for them to heal, but the loss of a child is a wound that never heals. It makes me wonder if Kenna cries like Grace and Patrick do. Did she feel that kind of loss when they took Diem from her? Because if she did, I can't imagine that Grace and Patrick would willingly allow her to continue to feel it since they know what it feels like firsthand. I don't think so, buddy. Buddy boy, pal, guy, chief, homie? I don't think so at all, actually. I don't think they know what it feels like firsthand. Nor should they. Like, yeah. That's all I can say. Every good character building thing that we had through this book is just down the fucking drain to try and go to bat for this woman. And like, that might be a person, again, hey, I get it. I might be a vindictive bitch. I may be a grudge holding, never forgiving bitch. And I'm cool with that, dude. If you're like, wow, that really changed my opinion of her. And like, Kenna's this like sad soul and she just needs love. And Ledger's the best love interest ever because he's like giving her a chance. I love that for you. Couldn't be me though. Could never be me. We cut back to Kenna in chapter 17. She's writing another Dear Scotty letter, how she started her new job and how she figured out that she could just like speed through the tutorial videos, and instead she found the Google Docs and printed off all of her letters that she wrote to Scotty on their printer. Like, she saved everything to Google Docs and then she printed it out, and so now she has this like giant stack of letters. Why'd she print them? I don't know. What is the purpose? She talks briefly, I don't know if it's in this chapter, if it was a little bit sooner, but she's kind of writing these letters to Scotty, hoping to give them to Diem so that Diem can have this like piece of her father, getting to know him. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. She talks about their 6-month anniversary and how he took her into a pawn shop and he just wanted to buy her something, like anything. And so she ended up finding this ring in the display case and she tried it on and it fit perfect and it was so beautiful and lovely. And they asked how much it was and it was $4,000. And he says, "What is that, a fucking pigeon?" And now I'm tired of the joke. Suddenly I hate it. Suddenly I hate this tearful moment that I just had 40 seconds ago. But it's $4,000, so he immediately puts it back and gets her like little plastic hands, like, you know, like the little tiny hands that go, they're like little finger cups. And so he bought her 10. It's 5 fingers for each thing, so she has 50 little fingers on her fingers. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? It's cute, I guess. It was cute and dorky for little 21-year-olds, I guess. Even that feels a little childish though. But anyway, and then she's like, well, reality is depressing as fuck. So is this job. I should probably get back to it. She's working, she's hanging out. She sees Ledger come in, and so she decides to try and duck away to the bathroom in order to avoid him, but instead she runs right into Ledger. He's like, "Oh, you got the job." Ledger says this without any hint as to whether he cares that I got the job or if he's bothered by it. I'm sure that if he was bothered by it, he would have shopped somewhere else today. It's not like he didn't know I was trying to get a job here. Then she ends up having to check Ledger out, like at the register. She tried to time it so she would be away, but it didn't work out very well. And she's talking about how she gets to, I feel like I can almost define a person based on their groceries. Single women buy a lot of healthy food. Single men buy a lot of steak and frozen dinners. Large families buy a lot of bulk meat and produce. Ledger gets frozen dinners, steak, Worcestershire sauce, Pringles, animal crackers, Fruity Pebbles, milk, chocolate milk, and a lot more Gatorade. Based on his selections, I conclude he's a single guy who spends a lot of time with my daughter. I'm jealous that he knows what my daughter likes, and the jealousy shows in the way that I toss the cans into the sack and then into the cart with a thud. And then she has to walk his groceries out to his car and like put them in his car for him. That's like part of store policy or company policy or something, I guess. So she's putting the groceries into the back seat of his truck. I don't like that I still find him attractive. I try to look everywhere but him as we make our way across the parking lot. When I was in his bar the other night, before I knew he was the owner, I couldn't help but notice how diverse the employees were. Where the did that come from? And what purpose did it serve? And also, hey, why is like the literal one only person of color that you have in this book a like drug addict that had to get saved by the rich white guy? That's kind of weird. That's a little sus and kind of weird. You couldn't have had like a healthy guy? Why did the one character with a tragic backstory have to be a black dude? What the fuck are we? Okay. This and then the fucking disabled people. I don't understand. If this would have stayed out of the fucking book, these 2 paragraphs, I wouldn't have ever thought about it. I never ever would have even like questioned it or like motives or theories or like whatever. But the fact you call it out specifically like this, like now I'm analyzing your plot. Like what the fuck, dude? They get to his truck and she's loading the groceries into the back. Sorry, that was so random. I totally forgot that sentence even happened. Like it's so out of place. So she's putting the Anyway, she's putting the groceries in the back of his truck and she sees a hair tie. It is obviously Diem's and it has some of her hair on it. And so Kenna picks it up and puts it on and she sees that there's a hair wrapped around it and she's like, oh my God, she has my hair. The same pin straight reddish brown hair that I have. So then she says, I feel Ledger approach me from behind and I don't care. I want to climb into this back seat, stay here with her booster seat and her hair scrunchie and see if I can find any other remnants of her that'll give me hints as to what she looks like and what kind of life she lives. I turn around, still staring at the scrunchie. Does she look like me? Yes, she does. How long have you known her? Since they brought her home. What's she like? Kenna. Do you walk to work? Yes. It's supposed to storm this afternoon. Lovely. You could Uber. Did they have Uber before you went to prison? Yes. Uber existed, but I don't have a phone, so I don't have the app. You don't have a phone? I had one, but I dropped it last month and I can't get one until I get my next paycheck. Back and forth. What the fuck is the point of that? I don't know. What is the point of anything that just happened? I don't know. But then she tells Ledger that she's going to keep the scrunchie. I want to tell him that if he's going to insist on shopping here, he should at least bring my daughter next time. But when I'm in his presence, I can't decide if I should be polite because he's the only thing linking me to my daughter, or if I should be mean because he's one of the only things keeping me from my daughter. Saying nothing when I want to say everything is probably the best bet for now. I glance back at him before I head into the store and he's still leaning against his truck watching me. I go inside and return the cart to the rack, then pull up my hair with Diem's scrunchie and wear it for the rest of my shift. Which objectively is like really sad. The following chapter, we're back in Ledger's perspective. He's at the bar, and Roman just bought a dozen cupcakes from the bakery. He does this every Friday because he wants to flirt. He doesn't even flirt with the bakery owner. She's just hot, and he just wants to be near her, but she's married, and it's this kind of like joke of, I don't know, he's just obsessed with her and spends all this money buying this like junk food. People quote this though, for some reason, this is a lot of people's favorite part of this book, when Roman is talking about this cupcake girl, this bakery woman. He says, you think she cooks as good as she bakes? Hopefully one day I find out. Almost 1 out of every 2 couples divorce. And he says, I bet Whitney could find you a nice girl to date. Fuck you, he mutters. I'd rather wait until Cupcake Girl's marriage falls apart. Does Cupcake Girl have a name? Everyone has a name. That last part, does Cupcake Girl have a name? Everyone has a name, is the quote that I see pulled all the fucking time on Goodreads. And I don't know if people are doing it like satirically, like if people are doing it like talking shit, or if people are genuinely like, oh my god, that made me LOL. I feel like I'm the weird one. I don't know, they're at the bar, they're vibing, she shows up because it's rainy, she's talking about how somebody called in so she had to work a double, then she shows up at the bar because it's the halfway point between her work and then her apartment, and so it's pouring, so she's soaking wet, so she goes up to the bar and she's just hanging out up there. Ledger is like, do you not have friends or family? Like, why are you not getting a ride from somebody? Like, do you not have a support system? And she's like, nope, I only know 2 people in this town, and one of them is 4 years old. The other one being Ledger. And he's like, I'll give you a ride home when you finish your coffee. They go out to his truck. There's tension. There's a bunch of stuff. And then... What? Oh my god. What do you need? Can you hear him? So then he gives her a ride back to his house, which is, again, so frustrating and stupid to me, but whatever. And the whole time he's like, oh my god, she doesn't have family. She doesn't have friends. She's all alone, and like, we're taking DM away from her, and if she doesn't even have a cell phone, like, she's getting no support from anybody. She's just this isolated woman in this town all by herself. I feel like I've said that about every fucking book that I've reviewed on this channel thus far. And she randomly, as he's about to drop her off, she says, do you regret kissing me? He nods. Because I do regret it. Maybe not for the reasons that she thinks I regret it, but I regret it all the same. Thanks for the ride. And then she jumps out of the car and goes inside. Chapter 19, we're flying through these, baby. This is when we get to the weird filler bullshit that could have been cut from the story. Kenna opens her chapter. I think about kidnapping DM sometimes. I'm not sure why I don't follow through with it. It's not like there's a worse life for me than the one I'm currently living. At least when I was in prison, I had a reason that I was unable to see my daughter. But right now, the only reason is the people raising her, and it hurts to hate the people raising her. I don't want to hate them. When I was in prison, it was harder to blame them because I was so grateful that she had people that were taking care of her. But from right here, in this lonely apartment, it's hard to not think of how great it would be to take DM and go on the run. Even if it was just for a few days before I got caught, I could give her everything while I had her. Ice cream, presents, maybe a trip to Disney World. We'd have a lavish week-long celebration before I turned myself in, and she'd remember it forever. She'd remember me. And then, by the time I got out of prison for kidnapping her, she'd be an adult, and she'd probably forgive me, because who wouldn't appreciate a mother who would risk going back to prison just to experience one good week with their daughter? Damn. And talks about, like, the only reason she's not doing it is because she still hopes that Grace and Patrick change their mind one day, so she doesn't want to sabotage that. And then also, she knows that it would scare the shit out of DM, because DM doesn't know who this woman is. You're gonna be like, I'm your mom, and just take her and expect her to be cool with it? So at least Kenna has the foresight, I guess, to recognize how problematic doing that would be. Like, I'm glad that we're at least that smart. I'm pretty impressed by that. Oh, and so then she's reflecting on her relationship with Scotty that night and talking about why Grace and Patrick don't like her, and how when she first went over to their house, how loving they were. Like, when she first met them, she was so taken aback because she had never really seen a good family. She had never been a part of one. She had never experienced it. And so when they gave her hugs, she felt kind of stiff and weird. And when they did their prayer before dinner, she had opened her eyes just to like soak in that moment to remember it forever. And that's when Grace caught her looking around and was like, what the fuck? And that's sad. Like, that made me a little bit sad for her. And then later that night, they went out to the back porch, her and Scotty did, and Scotty was smoking cigarettes. And so he went around the corner to go and pee and gave his cigarette to Kenna to hold for him. And that's when Grace walked out with a red Solo cup, because she's like, our family doesn't smoke. We don't do that, so we don't have ashtrays. Here's a cup. Like, don't leave your butts on the ground. And then Scotty came around the corner after his mom went inside. And so she ended up taking, obviously, the L for that one, not wanting to rat out Scotty. Her and Scotty, after that, she's like, oh, your parents hate me. And he's like, no, they don't hate you. Like, it'll just take some warming up. And she's like, well, what were you as a child? And blah, 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 blah. Asking about relationships and talking back and forth. And then he asks her, what about your parents? My father is somewhere. He got tired of paying child support, so he bolted. My mother and I don't get along. I haven't spoken to her in a couple of years. Why? We just aren't compatible. What do you mean? And then we get the same text that we've learned over the last 4 chapters, just reiterated into like one compiled paragraph. Hey, why do that? What's that for? I'm not stupid. I don't need to read the same thing 10 times. I get it. But in case you don't, I'm kidding. I know that you get it too, but I'm going to read it anyway because this is a touching moment, okay? And I'll give credit where credit is due. I wish that this is how it was presented to us rather than piecemealing it over the last 5 chapters and stretching this book out for no fucking reason, but that's another point for another time. What do you mean? I was alone a lot. She always made sure I had food, but she neglected me to the point that I was put in foster care twice. Both times they sent me back to live with her, though. It's like she was shitty, but not shitty enough. I think after growing up and seeing other families, I started to realize that she wasn't a good mother, or even a good person. It became really hard to coexist. It was like she felt I was her competition and not on her team. It was exhausting. After I moved out, we stayed in touch for a while, but then she just stopped calling and I stopped calling her. We haven't spoken in 2 years. What was it like having a good family? I'm not sure I knew how good it was until just now. Yes, you did. You love your parents and this house, I can tell. I don't know if I can explain it, but being here, it's like I can be my truest, most authentic self. I can cry, I can be in a bad mood or sad or happy. Any of those moods are accepted here. I don't feel that anywhere else. I don't know what that feels like. I'll give it to you. We'll get a house together someday, and I'll let you pick everything out. You can paint it however you want. You can lock the door and only let people in that you want in there. It'll be the most comfortable place that you've ever lived. Yo, that fucked me up. You can put a lock on the door and only let the people in that you want in there. It reminds me of the Where the Wild Things Are quote. There should be a place where only the things you want to happen. Oh man. God, that got me hard, man. It was so sad. That sounds like heaven. He kissed me then, made love to me, and as quiet as I tried to be, the house was even quieter. And so then the next morning, Grace obviously heard them, and just not good, right? Not a good first impression whatsoever on the family at all. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, you guys will be best friends, and she'll be pushing for a grandbaby and wedding in no time. Like, don't stress it. And then he died. This is so sad. It's executed so fucking poorly, and it makes me angry, but it is so sad. Chapter 20, we're back in Ledger's POV. It's been 3 days since she was last in the bar, and 3 days since I was last in the grocery store. I told myself I wasn't going to come back here. I decided that I'd just start shopping at Walmart again, but after having dinner with DM last night, I spent the entire night thinking about Kenna. So he does the only logical thing, and is parked in the parking lot outside of her work, and is watching her work. Just staring at her, thinking about life, waiting for her to get off, I guess, so he can give her a ride home. And as he's doing so, he sees Grace pull up, and Grace is getting DM out of the car, and they're about to go grocery shopping. And so he's like, hey, knock it off. Like, goes up to them and he's like, hey, you need to leave. Like, you need to leave right now. He's telling Grace this and getting her up to speed about why they can't be at the grocery store. Kenna comes out to put groceries in another vehicle, and she sees Ledger. They make eye contact, and she realizes what's happening. So she starts to run over, and he's like throwing DM in the car, and DM's throwing a fit because she wants to spend time with Uncle Ledger, and Grace is freaking out. Like, he doesn't even get her buckled in the car properly before Grace like reverses really fast and drive away, and Ken is like beating on the truck, like, or on the trunk, and like hitting the side of the car, like trying to get them to stop. And then she finally gives up, realizing that they're gone. She's pissed at Ledger, but she understands, and so she just starts crying, and he's like, go get in the truck. So she does. She goes and gets in his truck. He goes inside. He helps the person get the groceries in their trunk, which I'm glad. It was a little old lady. She needed the help, so I'm glad he took care of her at least. He goes inside, talks to the grocery store manager, goes back to her locker to get her purse. And when he's pulling her like tote bag out, he sees the giant stack of papers that are the letters to Scotty. He sees the top of it where it says, Dear Scotty, and he doesn't read it because he respects her privacy, but he makes note of it of like, I need to ask her about that later. And then he's thinking about the situation while he's making his way back out to the truck, and it's conflicting. Being thankful that she didn't make it to us in time, but heartbroken for her that she didn't make it to us in time. I want Kenna to meet her daughter, but I don't want DM to meet her mother, even though they're one and the same. I feel like Kenna's monster and DM's protector. Upon the drive home is kind of trauma dumping on Ledger about this whole situation with Diem and how she never even saw her. She says, other mothers told me what it would be like. They told me that they would take me to the hospital to give birth and that I would get 2 days with her. 2 whole days, just me and her. I can't tell you how much I looked forward to those 2 days. It was the only thing that I had to look forward to. But she was born early. I don't know if you knew that, but she was a preemie. 6 weeks. Her lungs were... Right after she was delivered, they had to transfer her to the NICU at another hospital. I spent my 2 days alone in the recovery room with an armed guard keeping watch over me. And when my 2 days were up, they sent me back to prison. I never got to hold her. I never even got to look into the eyes of the human that Scotty and I made. Kenna, don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Trust me, I would be lying if I said I didn't come here with the ridiculous hope that I would be welcomed into her life and even given some kind of role. But I also know where she belongs, so I would have been grateful for anything. I would have been so grateful to finally get to look at her, even if that's all I was ever allowed to do, whether you or Scotty's parents think I deserve that or not. I'm so grateful for them. You have no idea. The whole time that I was pregnant, I never had to worry about the kind of people who would raise her. They were the same 2 people who raised Scotty, and he was perfect. I'm not a bad person, Ledger. I'm not here because I think I deserve her. I just wanted to see her. That's all. That's it. Sometimes I wonder what Scotty would think if he could see us. It makes me hope that an afterlife doesn't exist because if it does, Scotty is probably the only sad person in heaven. My note just says, what a bitch. What a fucking bitch thing to say. That was really sad. Your daughter got taken away from you. I'm sorry, but how fucking dare you drop one of those? How dare you guilt trip him like that? Scotty is the only sad person in heaven? Every time that I get like an iota, a minuscule amount of empathy or whatever for this woman and feel bad for her and like, oh, maybe she should meet Diem. She says stupid shit like this that like, I'd kick this bitch's ass. I'm cursing a lot. I'm like really upset by that. So in response, the guilt tripping works. Because of course it does. Ledger pulls out his cell phone and goes to his photo album that he has specifically dedicated to Diem and hands Kenna his phone. And she just scrolls through all the videos and pictures that he has of Diem. Kenna becomes a different person right in front of my eyes. It's as if I'm witnessing her become a mother. And it might be the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. I feel like an absolute fucking monster for not helping her experience this moment sooner. I'm sorry, Scotty. It's tough, right? Like, this is a tough situation. I just feel like it's being handled so poorly and so quickly and so insanely. It makes me mad. To her house, he drops her off and she's asking about the whole family dynamic thing, and I've touched on it before where they've been raising Diem to not really miss her mom. Like, they've never talked about Kenna. They talk about Scotty, I think, a little bit, but most of it they like don't bring up because they don't want her to know that she's missing out on something in life. Like, they haven't really talked about the whole family dynamic thing. She's happy about that. And then Ledger offers to buy her dinner because like when he takes her upstairs and he opens up her fridge door, I think to get a water or something, it's completely barren. And she's like, yeah, I don't get paid until, later this week. And so I'm sorry, like, it's embarrassing. I don't have any money. I don't have any food. And he's like, oh, like, I'll buy you dinner. There's a bunch of stuff. And then... What? Oh my God. What do you need? Can you hear him? So he does. He goes and picks her up dinner. And they get, like, fast food and they're eating in his truck and they're having some more conversations about being in her life or not. And can I ask you a question? Of course. Do you hate me? I formed an opinion of you in my head after Scotty's death. All these years, it's like you've been some random person online, someone I could make strong judgments about and place blame on without actually having to know. But now that we're face to face, I don't know that I want to say all the things to you I've always wanted to say. But you still feel them? I don't know, Kenna. That first night when you walked into the bar, I thought you were the most intriguing girl that I'd ever met. But then I saw you the next day in front of Patrick and Grace's house. I thought you were the most disgusting person I'd ever met. And tonight, I'm starting to wonder if you're the saddest girl I've ever met. All of the above. I was afraid of that. Ew. I hate this. And they talk about her potentially moving away if she's not allowed to be part of Diem's life. So he's like, okay, so what are your next steps? Like, if they don't let you meet Diem, like, what are you going to do? Are you moving away? Like, what's the plan? And she's like, do you think they'll ever give me a chance? It wasn't a good look, to his parents, to the judge, to everyone in that courtroom. You just seemed so, what? Unremorseful. And she goes on this whole thing about, it wasn't unremorseful, I was just broken. Scotty was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I wasn't unremorseful. I was too devastated to speak. My lawyers were telling her she had to write a statement and she couldn't get anything on paper because she was just too shattered to even defend myself or care what happened to my life. I wasn't unemotional, I was broken. And his argument is like, okay, cool. I understand that. That makes sense. But also, what value do you bring to DM's life? Like, if you get involved, you're putting this whole new dynamic into her life. You're stressing out Grace and Patrick. You're complicating so much stuff. Like, you're broke. You barely have a job. You don't have a car. You don't have a phone. Like, what positive are you bringing to DM's life? Ouch. She's like, okay, fine. I'll save up money and leave. But I got it. I'm hearing you loud and clear, dude. I'll get the fuck out as soon as I can. But it's going to take a long time because I'm getting paid pennies at the grocery store and I'm working part-time. And his response is, I'll give you a job at the bar. Do it on Fridays. Do it in the evenings. Just come in through the back door. And if anybody asks, your name is Nicole. Oh my God. What a stupid man. She goes back up to her apartment and she ends the night with a letter to Scotty saying, she looks like both of us, but she laughs like you. She's perfect in every way. I'm so sorry that you never got to meet her. That is so sad. Chapter 22. Ledger. He's at the bar waiting for Kenna to have her first shift, and he's told Roman about this. Roman's the only person who knows who Kenna really is, knows that Nicole is Kenna. Roman's only response to hearing all of this and the justification and the whatever is, I don't want to hear another fucking word about the cupcakes ever again. And so she arrives. It's a little awkward, but she really hits it off with all of the bar people. She's working strictly in the back. So she's pretty much a bar back that doesn't work the bar. So if you've never worked in a bar or are familiar, usually you got like the little lackeys that go through and like clean up the place and do all the dishes in the back and are like managing stock and just kind of the runarounds when you're not the bartender. And so she just has to stay in the back. So she's like literally doing dishes. They have a very limited menu that she's kind of helping out with, helping some of the prep and stuff, you know, cutting the limes and the oranges for the drinks, and ends up like reorganizing the place. And she's in a good groove about it, getting along with all the bar people. And Ledger has to leave in the middle of the shift to go to a dance recital for DM. So she's literally just left alone with these people, pretending that she is this other woman. Cute, friendly banter of she's finding her people and it's found family and like something like that. While he's at the dance recital though, while Ledger's at the dance recital, Patrick tells him that they got the restraining order, like formally. They've talked about it. They've talked about it in passing. They've talked about wanting one, but it's official. They got one. After what happened in the grocery store, like they're not, or at the grocery store, they're not playing this game. They're terrified of Kenna. So he's like feeling very, very torn about that internally, about like, oh, like do I push them accepting Kenna? Do I ruin this relationship I've had with them? Do I ruin this insta love that I'm having for some woman? Do I throw away these lifelong relationships for some random woman? And then at the end, they're talking about his new house. I don't know if I had mentioned it yet. It comes up kind of sporadically that when he came back from the NFL, right, he bought his parents' house when they retired, but he also started building his own house, like out in the country. It's like 20 minutes out of town, and he and Roman are doing it as like a side project kind of on the weekends, and he's paying for it out of pocket. But it's been just kind of slow in the background over the last 3 years. And he's like, if I just would have waited 6 months before deciding to build that house back when DM was younger, 6 months would have been plenty of time to know that the little girl that Grace and Patrick were raising would infiltrate my life and my heart as if I made her myself. And so now he's torn because he doesn't want to move out of the house that he's in, but he's put so much time and money into this other house that he just doesn't really know what to do. We are officially 50% of the way through this book. Kenna finds out from the paperwork that he's paying her a lot more money than he probably should, right? Like, truly, is anybody surprised? Part of it is just bartending money. Like, it's a little bit more than like a random grocery store bagger position, but also he's probably throwing her a little extra money regardless, trying to get this bitch out of town faster, right? And so because of that though, she's like, okay, I feel obligated. Like, I gotta step it up. So like I was saying earlier, she's like reorganizing the whole place. She's going through the whole pantry. She's doing like all this good stuff for this place and reflecting on all of the friends that she's made at this bar, and everybody's so impressed with her and everybody likes her, and they're so impressed with how much that she cleaned the place. She goes on break, and that's when Roman comes out and gets introduced to Kenna formally, and he reveals the whole pro football injury thing that I talked about earlier. Why did we have to wait till 50% of the way through the book to do that? Because we had to do a character building thing for Ledger. Kenna had to have it be verified that Ledger's a good guy who takes care of people. That's the only reason. It's just used as a plot device to support the main male character in his humanity. Ledger eventually comes back. He sees them on their break together, and Roman immediately runs inside. So Ledger's a little suspicious about that. He's like, okay, maybe he was like grilling her or trying to like figure out what she's really here for, or like whatever. Cut to the evening. They're all closing up the bar. Ledger's going to give her a ride home that night. So she's hanging behind, and it's literally just the two of them, and he's taking forever doing stuff. And so she's sitting at the bar writing a letter to Scotty. He approaches her and he's like, hey, what are you doing? Real quick, just like puts it away. He's like, I know you're writing a letter to Scotty. Like, I saw it. I know what you're doing. Like, it's okay. I'm not judging you. And I didn't read it, by the way, either. And then he asks, how many letters have you written him? Over 300. Scotty hated writing. He used to pay me to write reports for him. That makes me laugh because I wrote a paper or two for him when we were together, and it's weird talking with someone who knew Scotty in a lot of the same ways that I knew him. I've honestly never experienced this before, and it feels good thinking about him in a way that makes me laugh instead of cry. Diem might grow up to be a writer someday. She likes to make up words. If she doesn't know what something's called, she just invents a word for it. They have this cute banter. He's just, again, revealing more and more about Diem, about this child who the parental people have very clearly stated that they don't want this bitch in the child's life. And he is completely disregarding it and just like giving away so much information about this child. This is where she says, hey, like, this is going to be a story about my life. He says, do any of the letters talk about what happened the night Scotty died? Yes, one of them. Can I read it? No. It gets awkward. She thanks him for the job. And then he drives her home. Weird tension subsides, I guess. I hate everything that's happening, and it's making me so uncomfortable and angry. I'm gonna go eat dinner, and maybe that'll tame my rage. This isn't gonna be like a mukbang, like I'm not gonna eat and talk. I would rather off myself than do that on camera, but editing Kaylee is just gonna have a really shitty time. So we got to chapter 24 with Ledger. Ledger is leaving the t-ball game, and he's packing up stuff, and he says, I glance up from packing the equipment, and I immediately start packing faster. The Mom Brigade is walking toward me. When they come at me in group formation like this, it's never good. They've all heard the rumors that Kenna is back in town. They know about the restraining order, they know about all this drama, and he just plays dumb about it. I don't know how to defend Kenna in these kinds of situations. I don't know that I should, but it feels wrong to continue allowing everyone to think the worst of her. So then he randomly shows up at Kenna's job at the grocery store to surprise drive her home. Didn't tell her, didn't ask her if she needed it, but he's like, oh, I just left the ball field, like I was on my way anyway, it's just convenient. She asks what else her daughter does, like what does DM do other than t-ball? He rattles off the dancing. He's like, yeah, I was at a dance recital last night, actually, like that's why I had to leave in the middle of the shift. What do you think happens next? He pulls out the dance recital video and she watches it. And he also tells her about the formal restraining order thing that's going on. And so that's why he shows her the video, is to like counteract the bad news of like, hey, here's your kid. Also, there's a restraining order against you. You'll never see her in person. God damn, bro. She shows up at the bar. She's wearing headphones and talking about how much that she hates music because any music that she hears reminds her of Scotty, loving Scotty or losing Scotty, or of her daughter and losing her daughter and like whatever. So she asked one of the waitresses at the bar to bring in like an extra pair of like noise canceling headphones for her to wear while she's doing the dishes. Kind of weird, but okay. It becomes a whole thing because Ledger makes it a point to make her a playlist of happy songs that have nothing to do with love or loss or anything that could make you sad. And Colleen shares it at the back of this book, like as a final parting gift, in case you're curious what those songs are. He realizes that everybody's getting along with her and everybody knows her. Everybody likes her. Everybody's doing her favors and happy and bringing her headphones and cupcakes and like bantering and cute. And he's like, I'm really upset that I left for that recital last night. Like, I feel like everybody got to know a part of Kenna that I don't know. And he's jealous. Chapter 25, from Kenna's perspective, she talks about getting a paycheck and how it was enough to finally get a new phone. She's on her phone outside, like enjoying the weather, downloading apps, and Lady Diana and her mom, they invite her to a Mother's Day brunch that they're having that Sunday. Ooh, that's kind of awkward. She doesn't want to admit, obviously, any situation and like what's going on with her daughter, so she kind of plays it off, and Lady Diana's mom is like, hey, like we have the food covered, we have everything covered, but if you happen to know people with like a table or chairs, like that'd be great, like we need some of that stuff. So she's like, okay, I can do that, like I'll do what I can. Even though she doesn't know anybody and she has no idea where she would get a table and chairs from, she agrees. She wants to be a team player, she wants to help, and even if she doesn't, she can at least say that she tried, right? But she goes to the bar early and decides to ask Roman, hey, like, do you guys have any spares? I would assume so, but like, can you help me out with this? They go up to his apartment. So I didn't explain this earlier. So it's the bar, and then upstairs, there's like his apartment, and then there's like kind of this weird loft area with like a couch and a TV where they put the runts, which means the bar patrons that are left behind, like the guys that are too drunk to drive home. And they like just bring them upstairs to sleep off the drunkenness and figure out where they need to go. So Roman brings Kenna up there into like a storage area that they have to get the table and chairs. They're talking back and forth. They talk about his sobriety mugs that I talked about earlier. And again, I hate that the only fucking person of color, the only black guy that we talk about at all is a recovering addict. Like, that feels so tacky and weird to me in a way that I can't really express. But I hope that like you're picking up what I'm putting down. That's the only motion that I can do, bro. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. As they're doing that, they're bringing everything downstairs. Ledger pulls up in his truck, and he's immediately like pissed. What were they doing in his apartment? Like, is Roman attracted to her? Why would they be talking? Why would they be having alone time? Roman clocks it immediately, and he's like, hey dude, we were literally getting tables and chairs for like an event she has on Sunday. You need to throw it, like we'll throw it in the back of your truck at the end of the shift so you can take her home. Trying to play it off, because he's like, hey, I know that you're a controlling douche. Wasn't what it looks like, and also it doesn't look like anything, you're just being weird about it. Ledger looks at Kenna and he says, Sunday's Mother's Day. Yep, might as well celebrate with the mothers at my apartment since I can't celebrate it with my own daughter. And then Ledger follows her into the bar, and he's super quiet and distant and grumpy and mopey. In the following chapter, Ledger acknowledges all the things that I just rattled off to you. I'm reacting like an asshole, I know it. Roman knows it, but my maturity can't seem to catch up and take over. How long was she in Roman's apartment? Why did she seem short with me? Why the fuck do I care? I don't know what to do with these feelings, so I wad them up and tried to keep them stuffed in my throat or stomach or wherever people tuck this shit away. Roman is calling him out on it, and he's like, dude, it wasn't anything like that. Also, like, stop being a jealous prick. You have feelings for her, just admit it. He's like, I don't have feelings for her. I don't know what you're talking about. Roman says, you got so much money, like, from the NFL. You got a lucrative business. I don't think I would describe a small town bar as lucrative, but he does, so I'll roll with it. If you wanted her out of here, you would literally like just give her the money to leave town. You are forcing her to stay here and like work for you and be near you in proximity to like earn her way to leave. Like, you don't want her to leave. Like, just admit your feelings, admit what's going on, like stop being a pussy, like get it together. Obviously not as vulgar as how I just made it sound, but that's what it is. Ledger closes out his chapter thinking, I didn't hire Kenna because I want her to leave. I hired her because I like being in her presence. I hired her because I think about kissing her again every time my head meets the pillow at night. I hired her because I'm hoping Patrick and Grace have a change of heart and I want to be around if that happens. There's a bunch of stuff, and then... What? Oh my god, what do you need? Can you hear him? My note says, why does he feel this way? What has happened for him to feel this way? Her crying over a video of her daughter? Her wanting to be in her daughter's life? Like, is that all it takes? Again, I get it. I'm trying so hard to get it. I'm trying so hard to feel empathetic for this woman, and like, I don't know. It couldn't be me. I can't relate. I can't relate to Ledger's position and what's going on right now. I don't know if it's because of poor writing or because of like, not a personal vendetta, but like a personal stance on life that like, I could never forgive somebody for this, especially in the way that it has been presented so far. I'm like, I don't feel bad for her. I don't give a shit. There has not been a compelling argument for this woman to be in her child's life. Sorry. Maybe I'm the bad guy. If I'm the bad guy, I'm cool with that. Like, just let me know. Or let me know if, like, I'm not missing the mark. If there really is just like not enough there to make you feel that way. I know this might be biased, and so I'm really hoping like if you have read this on your own and came to these same conclusions, or like, I don't know, dude. I just, let me know what you're thinking, please. Please tell me if I'm crazy. In chapter 27, from Kenna's perspective, she heard everything that Roman and Ledger said when they were talking about being careful about being in her presence and how she would do anything to get close to Diem, and I'm not trying to hook up with her, dude. Like, you should hook up with her. You need to admit your feelings and all this other stuff. And so Kenna is super red in the face. She's embarrassed. She's a little flustered. She's a little like, oh, he does like me. There's a lot of emotions going on, right? Really, what she gets out of the conversation is like, oh, he doesn't want me to leave. Roman's right. If Ledger wanted me to leave, he would give me the money to leave. Like, he must like me. As I pass him, there's a different kind of tension between us. It isn't a tension necessarily related to Diem anymore. It's a tension that seems to exist simply because we're in each other's presence. She says that she got a phone. He says, let me put my number in it. She texts his phone from her phone, so he has her number, asks him to take the table and chairs from earlier to help her take it upstairs, up into her apartment. So he goes upstairs, right? He gives it, and it turns into them making out. As much as his kiss makes me feel it's nothing compared to the heartache that would follow if the Landrys, Grace and Patrick, found out that he's seeing me behind their backs. I can't have that hanging over my head. He starts to lean in again, making my entire body feel unstable, but I somehow manage the strength to shake my head. Please don't. It hurts enough already. I know. I'm sorry. I feel so helpless, useless. I'm sorry. And then he walks away. In the following chapter, Ledger is visiting Diem. Diem is so excited to see him, and it's super cute. Ledger is, again, being a t-ball coach. He's hanging out with Diem and Grace and Patrick, and everything's all cute and happy and hunky-dory, and in the middle of the t-ball game, he gets a text message from Kenna saying, I need you now. I need you to come pick me up. So he shows up in the middle of her work shift at the grocery store to pick her up because she had been served the restraining order papers in the middle of her shift. This small town cop douchebag guy couldn't have waited until she was done with her shift. He knew where she lived. He couldn't have delivered it at her house. It was a power play. It was a power play douchebag move, and so she's crying. So he goes to pick her up. They're talking about it, and Ledger's like, I'm so sorry. Like, this is so sad. I pull back onto the road feeling heavy. What I said last night about feeling useless is the most accurate term for what I am right now. I can't help Kenna other than how I already am helping her. Patrick and Grace aren't changing their minds, and anytime I try to approach the subject with them, they're immediately defensive. It's difficult because I agree with why they don't want Kenna around, but I also vehemently disagree. They would cut me out of Diem's life before they would agree to add Kenna's to it. That's what scares me the most. If I push the subject too much, or if they find out I'm even remotely on Kenna's side, I'm afraid that they'll start viewing me as a threat the same way that they view Kenna. The worst part is I don't blame them for how they feel about Kenna. The impact of her choices has been detrimental to their lives, but the impact of their choices is becoming detrimental to her life. There's no good answer. I've somehow immersed myself in the depths of an impossible situation. One that doesn't leave a single solution that would lead to at least one person not suffering. And so he takes Kenna to get a snow cone. That's what he does with Diem. Anytime that Diem is sad or has a long day or whatever, Kenna is just fawning over this idea that this man is so secure in his masculinity that he goes up and gets the rainbow-colored snow cones. And he takes her to his house, like the house that he's building out in the boonies. And it's beautiful. I can't grasp this type of lifestyle, not even for my daughter. The countertops in the outdoor kitchen that overlook the backyard are probably worth more than everything I've ever owned in my entire life added up. There are 3 bedrooms, but the main bedroom is the highlight for me, with a ridiculous closet almost as big as the bedroom itself. They have some like awkward back and forth, which I haven't brought up because it's not really relevant to the plot. But he was engaged to a woman. They were supposed to get married like that very day, I guess. He broke off the engagement because said woman... I hope this is my hair that was just in my food. He broke off the engagement with said woman because she had, like, pestered him about loving Diem more than his own children, like if they were going to have children together. And he's like, I wouldn't love her more, I would love her the same. And that wasn't comfortable to the woman. She's like, no, like, you should love your own children more. Like, Diem's not your kid. Like, I don't know why you have such an obligation to this, like, random child. And so he said, fuck off, bitch, we're done. And broke up with her. And so I guess in that sense, it's used as a plot device to like reiterate the importance of like DM in his life. But then he's willing to risk losing DM to get with DM's mom. So like, again, anytime I read a Colleen Hoover book, that's the only reaction that I have. This whole time at his house, they're having these like moments, these very touching, you know, I got engaged to this woman because of X, Y, and Z. We broke up because of X, Y, and Z. She explains her feelings, and they have this connection. They're watching the sunset, and Ledger drops his forehead to mine, and we both close our eyes and just silently breathe through whatever this moment is. I can feel everything he's not saying. I can even somehow feel the kiss that he's not giving me. But if we slip back into the moment we shared last night, it would rip that wound open even wider until that's all I am. He knows just as much as I do that this isn't a good idea. What are you going to do, Ledger? Hide me in your closet until she's 18? It's a huge closet. There's only a beat of silence before it's sliced into by my laughter. Chapter 30, Ledger's perspective. He's in his office, processing payroll. He calls Kenna into his office to talk about leaving town. He calls her into his office to say, hey, if you want to leave town, I'll give you the money that you want. She says, do you want me to leave? No. Then why are you telling me? I could give her several reasons. Because you need to know you have options. Because if you stay here, someone will eventually recognize you. Because if we keep working together, we'll shatter whatever is left of our flimsy boundary. You know why. And then one of the waitresses busts through the door. She's like, oh my God, hot goss. There's something going on between you. And it's this like stupid whole side thing. And eventually goes and talks to her again after the waitress interrupted. And all Kenna says is, I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. Why? You know why. She disappears back inside the building, and I sit in my fucking feelings. I stare at my truck with an intense urge to drive straight to Patrick and Grace's house and tell them about Kenna. I want to tell them how selfless she is. I want to tell them what a hard worker she is. I want to tell them how forgiving she is, because every single one of us has been making her life a living hell, yet she somehow doesn't seem to resent us for it. I want to tell Patrick and Grace every wonderful thing about Kenna, but even more than that, I want to tell Kenna how wrong I was when I told her DM wouldn't benefit from having her in her life. Who am I to say that to a mother about her own child? Who the am I to make that kind of judgment? I don't think you said anything inappropriate, actually. Chapter 31 from Kenna. Ledger gives her a ride home, pulls out an umbrella, walks her up to her apartment, walks her into her apartment. What do you want, Ledger? I want to get to know you better. What do you want to know? More about you, your likes, your dislikes, your goals. What do you want to do with your life? I've always wanted to be a locksmith. A locksmith? Yeah. Why a locksmith? Because no one can be mad at a locksmith. They show up to help when people are in a crisis. I think it would be a rewarding job to make people's shitty days a little better. I can't say I've met anyone who wanted to be a locksmith. Well, now you have. Next question. Why did you choose the name Diem? Why did the Landrys choose to not change the name I gave her? They were worried that maybe you and Scotty had discussed what to name her, and Diem was the name Scotty chose. Scotty never even knew I was pregnant. Did you know you were pregnant before Scotty died? No, I never would have pled guilty if I knew that I was pregnant with DM. Why did you plead guilty? I wasn't in a good headspace. It's like not wanting to be alive, right? Like that's her thought, is like she was so dead, she was so done. He said, where would we be right now if I didn't know Scotty? What do you mean? The night we met at the bar, you said you didn't know who I was. What if I was just some random guy who didn't know DM or Scotty or you? What do you think would have happened between us that night? A lot more than what did happen. Sometimes I wonder if we would even be talking right now if I didn't know DM. Why does it matter? Because it would be the difference between you wanting to be with me for me or wanting to be with me because you could use me for my connections. If I wanted to use you for your connections, I would have fucked you by now. She's like, you should go. He grabs her arm, and, you know, they have this back and forth, and he's like, I wasn't insulting you. I was just working through some thoughts out loud. In a matter of a few weeks, I went from hating you to liking you to wanting the world of you, so forgive me if those feelings sometimes overlap. You know, he's like, I wish I could take back what I said to you about DM. Like, you are a good mother, you would be a good mom, like, you should be in her life. Like, that's not my place to say that. You're selfless and you're kind and you're strong and you're everything I want DM to be someday. And I don't know how I can change their minds, but I'm gonna try. I want to fight for you because I know that's what Scotty would have wanted me to do. And then they make out. And then he picks her up, takes her to her inflatable mattress because, again, she's like poor with no money. He takes her to the air mattress. They're about to do it. He's like, do you have a condom? She's like, no. He runs down to his car to get said condom. She thinks to herself while he's running down and getting this, I wish I could write a quick letter to Scotty. I feel like I need to warn him about what's about to happen, which is stupid because he's dead and it's been 5 years and I can have sex with whoever I want, but he was the last person I'd ever had sex with, so this feels like a really big moment, not to mention it's with his best friend. I'm so sorry, Scotty, I whisper, but not enough to stop it. They end up doing it. It's great. It's phenomenal. He's so big. She's so tight. It's the best that they've ever had. Like, is anybody surprised? The only thing... Oh, Jesus Christ. This might be the most heinous thing in this entire fucking book, which says a lot. I walk to the counter and slide... This is, again, post-coitus, immediately after. Like, still actively in the recovery zone, okay? I walk to the counter and slide my notebook in front of me. I grab a pen and begin writing a letter to Scotty. It doesn't take me long. It's a short letter, and when I finish, I close the notebook. I catch Ledger staring at me. He's on his stomach with his chin resting on his arms. What did you write? This is the third time that he's asked me to read him something. This is the first time I felt like conceding. I open my notebook to the letter that I just wrote. I run my finger over Scotty's name. You might not like it. Is it the truth? I nod. Ledger points to the empty spot next to him on the bed. Then I want to hear it. Come here. I raise an eyebrow in warning, because not everyone can handle the truth as well as they think that they can. But he remains steadfast, so I join him on the bed. Dear Scotty, I had sex with your best friend tonight. Okay. It's okay. Dear Scotty, I had sex with your best friend tonight. I'm not sure that's something that you would want to hear, or maybe it is. I get the feeling, if you can hear these letters from wherever you are, that you would want me to be happy. And right now, Ledger is the one thing in my life that makes me happy. If it's any consolation, the sex with him was great, but no one could hold a candle to you. Love, Kenna. I close the notebook and rest it on my lap. Ledger is quiet for a moment as he stares stoically at the ceiling. You're just saying that so you don't hurt his feelings, right? Sure, if that's what you need to hear. It was good though, right? The best, I whisper. At that exact moment I say that, a loud clap of thunder rolls through the sky outside with perfect timing. It's so loud I can feel it in my stomach. Oh shit. Scotty didn't like that. You better take it back. Tell him I suck. I immediately slide off of Ledger and lie on my back. I'm sorry, Scotty. You're better than Ledger, I promise. We laugh together, but then we both sigh and listen to the rain for a while. Ledger eventually puts his hand on my hip and rolls me toward him. I feel like I need another opportunity to prove myself. The second time is much longer and somehow even better. What the fuck is happening? I feel like in every single one of these books, I have one of those moments where I'm like where I'm hyperventilating. I hyperventilate or I get really hot and I'm like, oh my god, dude, I can't do this. This is that moment for this book where I'm just like, what are we doing? Why would we say that? Why would anybody write that? In what universe? Who the fuck thinks of that? Chapter 32, he goes home. It's Mother's Day. He made a pit stop on the way over, and he gives Grace flowers, and he says, Happy Mother's Day. I forgot today was Mother's Day. I woke up next to Kenna this morning, and I said nothing to her about it. I feel like an asshole. DM crinkles her nose. Am I supposed to give my mother flowers? She's really been working through the whole family tree lately, and it's cute, but also concerning. She's eventually going to find out her family tree was struck by lightning. It's kind of a banger sentence, I'll give you that. Patrick finally chimes in. We gave your Nana flowers last night, remember? DM shakes her head. No, I'm talking about my mother that isn't here, the one with the tiny car. Are we supposed to give her flowers? Patrick and I trade another glance. I'm sure he's mistaking the pain on my face for discomfort at DM's question. I kiss DM on the forehead just as Grace returns to the car. Your mother will get her flowers, I say to DM. Love you. Tell Grandma Landry that I say hello. Diem smiles and pats my cheek with her tiny hand. Back away from the car and tell them to have a safe trip, but as they're driving away, I feel my heart grow heavier as Diem's words sink in. She's starting to wonder about her mother. She's starting to worry. And even though Patrick assumed that I was reassuring her by saying Diem's mother would get flowers, I was actually making her a promise. One that I won't break. So he brings Kenna flowers after her Mother's Day brunch that she has with the other women at the apartment complex. And they get some lunch together, they get some snow cones, and they go out to Ledger's house, like out in the boonies, to go and work on it because he has some stuff to do, and she asks if she can join. On the way out there, though, he's thinking, every time I'm with her, the questions are always on the tip of my tongue. What happened? Why did you leave him? But it's either never the right moment or the moment is right, but the emotions are already too heavy. I wanted to ask her last night when I was asking her all the other questions, but I just couldn't get it out. Sometimes she looks too sad for me to expect her to talk about things that will make her even sadder. I need to know, though. I feel like I can't fully defend her or blindly root for her to be in Diem's life until I know exactly what happened that night and why. Kenna, I want to know what happened that night. And Kenna finally decides in chapter 33 that she will read that letter, the Dear Scotty letter, where she revealed everything that happened that night. If there's anything that Colleen Hoover does, she writes moments like the moment isn't very good, the backstory is, and I think that's where Colleen has like difficulty, is it's almost like she gets these like strikes of thoughts or these ideas that are so fucking good objectively, and then she just can't like connect it into a full story. I'm not sure where the disconnect is in like her brain or maybe her editor's brain or like where the ball gets dropped. The premise of these things is wonderful. The execution is fucking horrendous though. Trigger warning for just utter sadness and like car accident stuff, okay? I'll put a little thing up here until I'm done talking about it, or I'll give you like a timestamp to skip to, okay? Dear Scotty, your car was my favorite place to be. I don't know if I ever told you that. It was the only place that we could get true solitude. I used to look forward to the days our schedules would align and you would pick me up from work. I'd get in your car and it was like feeling the same welcoming comforts of home. You always had a soda waiting for me, and on the days you knew I hadn't had dinner yet, you'd have a small order of fries from McDonald's sitting in the cup holder because you knew that they were my favorite fries. You were sweet. You always did sweet things for me, tiny little gestures here and there that most people don't think of. I've gone over the day that you died so many times. I once wrote every single second of that day down on paper. Most of it was an estimate, of course. I don't know if I actually spent a minute and a half brushing my teeth that morning, or if the break I took at work was really 15 minutes to the second, or if we really spent 57 minutes at a party we went to that night. I'm sure I'm off in my calculations by a few minutes here or there, but for the most part, I can account for everything that happened that day, even the things I wish I could forget. A guy you went to college with was having a party, and you had been his roommate your freshman year, so you said you owed it to him to make an appearance. I was sad to have to be at the party, but in hindsight, I'm glad that you got to see most of your friends that night. I know it probably meant something to them after you died. Even though you had made an appearance, it wasn't your scene anymore, and I knew that you didn't want to be there. I knew that we wouldn't be there long, so I found a chair in the corner of the living room and curled up into it while you made your rounds. I don't know if you knew this, but I watched you for the entire 57 minutes that we were there. You were so magnetic. People's eyes would light up when they would look at you. Crowds would gather around you, and when you would spot someone that you hadn't greeted, you'd give this huge reaction and make them feel like they were the most important person at the party. I don't know if that's something that you practiced, but I have a feeling that you didn't even know that you had that kind of power. The power to make people feel appreciated and important. Around the 56th minute we were there, you spotted me sitting in the corner smiling at you. You walked over to me, ignoring everyone around you, and I suddenly found myself the focus of your sole attention. You sat down next to me in the chair and you kissed my neck and whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry I left you alone." "Do you want to leave now?" you asked. "Not if you're having fun." "Are you having fun?" you asked. I shrugged. I could think of a lot more things that were more fun than a party. By the smile that spread across your face, I gathered that you felt the same. "Want to go to the lake?" I nodded, because those were my favorite three things. That lake, your car, you. You stole a 12-pack of beers and we snuck out and you drove us to the lake. We had a favorite spot where we'd go some nights. It wasn't far from where I lived with roommates, so sometimes you would show up at my apartment in the middle of the night and we'd go there and have sex on the dock or in the water or in your car. That particular night, we had the beer that you had taken from the party and some leftover edibles that you had bought off of a friend the week before. We had the music turned up and we were making out in the water. We didn't have sex that night. And I liked that about you so much, because one of the things I've always hated about relationships is how makeouts seem to stop when sex becomes a thing. But with you, the makeouts were always just as special as sex. You kissed me in the water like it was the last time that you would ever kiss me. And I wonder if you had some sort of fear or premonition, and that's why you kissed me the way that you did. Or maybe I only remember it so well because it was our last kiss. We got out of the water and we were lying naked on the dock under the moonlight, the world spinning above our heads. "I want meatloaf," you said. I laughed at you because it was such a random thing to say. "Meatloaf?" You grinned and said, "Yeah, doesn't that sound good? Meatloaf and mashed potatoes? Let's go to the diner." You'd had more to drink than me, so you asked me to drive. And it wasn't like us to drink and drive, but I think we felt invincible under the moonlight. We were young and in love, and surely no one dies when they're at their happiest. We were also high, so our decisions were slightly more impaired that night, but for whatever reason, you asked me to drive. And for whatever reason, I didn't tell you that I shouldn't. I got in that car knowing that I had tripped on gravel as I reached for the door. I still got behind the wheel, even though I had to blink really hard to make sure that the car was in drive and not in reverse. And I still chose to drive us away from the lake, even though I was too drunk to remember how to turn down the volume. Coldplay was blasting so loud over the radio that it was making my ears hurt. We didn't even get very far before it happened. You knew the roads better than I did. They were gravel and I was going too fast and I didn't know how sharp the turn was. You said slow down, but you said it kind of loud and it startled me, so I slammed on the brakes. But I know now that slamming on the brakes on a gravel road can make you lose complete control of the car, especially when you're drunk. A lot of people are lucky after a wreck because they don't remember the details. They have recollections of things that happened before the wreck and after the wreck, but over time, every single second of that night has come back to me whether I wanted it to or not. The top was down on your convertible, and all I can remember when I felt the car hit the ditch and begin to tilt was that we needed to protect our faces, because I was worried that the glass from the windshield might cut us. That was my biggest fear in that moment, a little bit of glass. I didn't see my life flash before my eyes. I didn't even see your life flash before my eyes. All I was worried about in that moment was that your windshield would be damaged, because surely no one dies when they're at their happiest. I felt my whole world tilt, and then I felt gravel against my cheek. The radio still blasting Coldplay, the engine still running. My breath had caught in my throat and I couldn't even scream, but I didn't need to. I just kept thinking about your car and how mad that you probably were, and I remember whispering, "I'm sorry." Like your biggest concern would be that we would have to call a tow truck. Everything happened so fast, but I was calm in the moment. I thought you were too. I was waiting for you to ask me if I was okay, but we were upside down in a convertible and everything that I'd had to drink that night was flipping over in my stomach, and I felt the weight of gravity like I had never before. I thought I was going to puke, and so I needed to right myself up, and so I struggled to find my seatbelt. When it finally clicked, I remember falling. It was only a couple of inches, but it was unexpected, and I let out a yelp. You still didn't ask me if I was okay. It was dark, and I realized that we might be trapped, and so I reached over and touched your arm to follow you out. I knew that you would find a way out. I relied on you for everything, and your presence was the only reason that I was still calm. I wasn't even worried about your car anymore because I knew that you would be more worried about me than your car. And it's not like I was speeding too much or driving too recklessly. I was only a little drunk and a little bit high, but so very stupid to believe that even a little bit wasn't too much. Scotty, shook your arm when I said your name that time. I wanted you to know that I was okay. I thought maybe you were in shock and that's why you were so quiet. When you didn't move, and I realized that your arm was just dangling against the road that had somehow become our ceiling, my first thought was that you might have passed out. But when I pulled my hand back to figure out a way to right myself up, it was covered in blood. Blood that was supposed to be running through your veins. I couldn't fathom that a silly wreck on the side of a county road that landed us in a ditch would actually hurt us, but that was your blood. I turned your face to mine, but you looked like you were sleeping. I tried pulling you, but you still wouldn't budge because the car was on top of part of you. Your shoulder and your arm were trapped, and I couldn't pull you out or get to your seatbelt. And even though it was dark, I realized moonlight reflects off of blood the same way it reflects off the ocean. Your blood was everywhere. The entire car upside down made everything even more confusing. Where were your pockets? Where was your phone? I needed a phone, so I scrambled and felt around with my hands looking for a phone for what felt like an eternity, but all I could find were rocks and glass. The whole time I was muttering your name through chattering teeth. It was a prayer, but I didn't know how to pray. No one had ever taught me. I just remember the prayer you had given over family dinner at your parents' house and the prayers I used to hear my foster mother Mona pray. But all I'd ever heard people do was bless food, and I just wanted you to wake up, so I said your name over and over again and hoped that God would hear me, even though I wasn't sure if I was getting his attention. What I experienced in those moments was indescribable. You think you know how you'll react in a terrifying situation, but that's the thing. You can't think in a terrifying situation. There's probably a reason for how disconnected we become to our own thoughts in moments of sheer horror. Parts of me were moving without my brain even knowing what was happening. My hands were searching around for things I wasn't even sure I was looking for. I was growing hysterical because with each passing second, I became more aware of how different my world would be going forward. How that 1 second had altered whatever course that we were on, and things would never be the same. And all the parts of me that had become disconnected in that wreck would never fully reconnect. I crawled out of the car, through the space between the ground and my door, and once I was outside, standing upright, I puked. The headlights were shining on the row of trees, but none of the light was helping us, and I ran around the passenger side of the car to free you, but I couldn't. There was your arm, sticking out under the car, the moonlight glimmering in your blood. I grabbed your hand and squeezed it, but it was cold. I was still muttering your name. Scotty, Scotty, no, no, no. I went around to the windshield and tried kicking it in to break it, but even though it was already cracked, I couldn't break it enough to fit through it or pull you out. I knelt down and pressed my face to the glass, and I saw what I had done to you then. It was a stark realization that no matter how much you love someone, you can still do despicable things to them. I groaned and I sobbed, and when I went back around the car to touch your hand again, there was nothing. No pulse in your wrist, no heartbeat in your palm, no warmth in your fingertips. And then I panicked. It's the only way to describe what happened to me. I couldn't find either of our phones, and so I started running to the highway. The further I got, the more confused I grew. I couldn't imagine what happened was real, or what was happening was real. I was running down the highway with one shoe. I could see myself like I was ahead of me, running toward me like I was in a nightmare, not making any progress. I couldn't breathe because you were dead, and how was I supposed to breathe when you had no air? It was the worst realization I ever had, and I fell to my knees and I screamed into the darkness. I don't know how long I was on the side of the road. Cars were passing me and I still had your blood on my hands, and I was scared and angry, and I couldn't stop seeing your mother's face. I had killed you, and everyone was going to miss you, and you wouldn't be around to make anyone feel appreciated or important anymore, and it was my fault. And I just wanted to die. I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to die. I walked out into the street at what I'm guessing was around 11 at night, and a car had to swerve to miss me. I tried 3 times with 3 different cars, but none of them hit me, and all of them were angry that I was in the road in the dark. I had already walked over a mile, and I didn't know how far I was from my apartment, but I knew that if I could just get there, if I could step off of my 4th floor apartment balcony, because that was the only thing that I could think of to do in the moment, I wanted to be with you. But in my mind, you were no longer trapped under the car in the wreck. You were somewhere else, floating around in the dark, and I was determined to join you because what was the point? You were my whole point. And that's the last thing I remember. There's a long stretch of nothing between me leaving you and me even realizing I left you. Hours. Your family was told I walked home and fell asleep, and that's not exactly what happened. I'm almost positive I fainted because of shock, because when the cops beat on my bedroom door the next morning and I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. I noticed a small puddle of blood on the floor next to my head. I must have hit my head going down, but I didn't have time to inspect it because police were in my bedroom, and one of them had his hands on my arm and was lifting me to my feet. And that's the last time that I ever saw my bedroom. I was confused. I was weak. I was hurting, but the most powerful of all the feelings flooding in me in that moment was my loneliness. Little did I know that that feeling would become perpetual, permanent. I knew that when they put me in the back of the seat of the police car that my life had reached its peak with you, and nothing that came after you would ever matter. There was before you and there was during you. For some reason, I never thought that there would be an after you. But there was, and I was in it, and I'll be in it forever. There's more to read, but my throat is dry and my nerves are shot, and so she stops. Ledger tells her to read on, and she does, and she talks about the interrogation. And it was in the interrogation room that she found out that he survived, and that he had lived for hours after she abandoned him, and that he had tried to crawl for help. Crawl. Not sure what happened to his arm that was trapped under the car. I can only fucking imagine. Crawled for help and bled out on the side of an empty county road. So when she heard that in the interrogation room, she was heartbroken again. She just wanted to die. And so when it finally came around for the bail hearing and for all these other hearings, she didn't respond. She couldn't say anything. And so what people had interpreted as unremorseful was her just not wanting to be there and not able to come to terms with what had happened and what she had done inadvertently. Looking back on it now, I realize I was in deep and dangerous state of depression, and I don't think anyone noticed, or maybe there was and just no one cared. Everyone was hashtag Team Scotty, like we were never even on the same team. Everyone wanted justice, and sadly, justice and empathy couldn't both fit inside that courtroom. But what's funny is I was on their side. I wanted justice for them. I emphasized with them, with your mother, with your father, with all the people in your life who were packed inside that courtroom. I pled guilty to my lawyer's dismay. I had to. They scheduled another court date for sentencing, and it was sometime between those 2 court dates that I realized I hadn't had my period in a while. I thought my cycle was messed up, so I didn't mention it to anyone. Had I known I was growing a part of you inside me sooner, I'm positive that I would have found a way to go to trial and fight for myself. Fight for our daughter. When the sentencing date came, I tried not to listen to your mother read her victim impact statement, but every word she spoke is still engraved in my bones. I keep thinking about what you told me as you were carrying me up the stairs on your back that night in her house, about how they wanted more kids, but you were their miracle baby. That's all I could think of in that moment. I had killed their miracle baby, and now they had no one, and it was my fault. I had planned to give a statement, but I was too weak and too broken, and so when it came time for me to stand up and speak, I couldn't. I'm still not clear on what happened in that courtroom that day, because the day was so much like the night, a nightmare that I was somehow watching play out from a distance. 7 years, I remember thinking when they sentenced me. That's bullshit. Every morning I wake up, and I silently apologize. To you, to your parents, to DM. Throughout the day, I silently thank your parents for raising our daughter since we can't. And every night, I apologize again before I fall asleep. I'm sorry, thank you, I'm sorry. That's my day. Every day on repeat. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. My sentence was not justice, considering the way that you died. Eternity wouldn't be justice, but I hope your family knows that my actions that night didn't come from a place of selfishness. It was horror and shock and agony and confusion and terror that guided me away from you that night. It was never selfishness. I'm not a bad person, and I know that you know that wherever you are, and I know that you forgive me. It's just who you are. I only hope that one day our daughter will forgive me too, and your parents, and then maybe, by some miracle, I can start to forgive myself. Until then, I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Repeat. Bro. You gotta be shitting me, man. That was really sad. I'm probably gonna cut that down. I cut out like half of that, like reading, and I'll probably cut out like another half when I'm editing this later. Just know, like, as of recording right now, that was 15 minutes that I read, and it was probably like a full 30-minute chapter. Chapter 34, she closes the document. I can't read it. I can't do this anymore. They pull up to the house, and he's angry. He gets out of the truck, and he's throwing stuff, and he's smashing stuff on the ground, and like is so distraught and pissed off and like expressing this emotion. But he comes to her door, and he opens the passenger door, and he's like, I'm not mad at you. It's just a lot to process. Like reassuring her that his outburst isn't aimed toward her, that it's just like such a shitty situation for everybody involved, and he's so upset the way that everybody has handled this so far. And he says, I'm sorry that you lost him. Agony spreads across his face as he continues, what if Scotty can see how we've been treating you? I'm part of everything that's been tearing you down all these years, and I'm sorry, Kenna. I'm so sorry. It's okay. What I wrote doesn't change anything. It was still my fault. It's not okay. None of this is okay. And then she and Ledger have sex. Tension. What's tension? What is feeling an emotion? God forbid we give an emotional moment and give it room to breathe and room to process. No, we use trauma the same way that we use everything else as just a mechanism to lead the characters into having sex and liking each other. God forbid we build them as individuals, or build a plot, or a worthwhile experience for the reader. Whiplash this bitch into having spicy time. Because sex sells, guys. It's not good writing that sells a book. It's not an interesting plot that makes you feel something. It's smut and spice. That's what sells books. How fucking dare I ever get my hopes up for anything else? They're working on the flooring in his house. Again, in the middle of the spice scene that they have at his house, his parents drop by, right? The RV parents that randomly drop by without saying a word. He plays it off. He's like, hey, get out of here, guys. Go home. Like, don't worry about, she's my worker. This is, Nicole? Is that what they were calling her? This is Nicole. She's a new worker at the bar. Don't worry about it. Like, don't look at her. Like, whatever. So they're like, and they go to leave. Ledger and Kenna continue to, like, have little spicy flirty time at the house. That's really all you can get out of that chapter. There's a lot more between that. But then when she goes to drop off, he goes to drop off Kenna after, like, all of the shenanigans that happens. And then he goes back home to go and visit his parents. He's visiting them, and his mom is like, I know who she is. Like, I recognized her immediately. Do the Landrys know? How are you sleeping with your best friend's murderer? She's like, I get it, and like, I always thought they were too harsh on her also, but like, ultimately, like, you're in her kid's life, and like, you're the Landry's like second son, basically. Like, how are they taking this? And he's like, they don't know yet. And his mom's like, oh baby. And then he just cries in his mom's arms. This isn't gonna end well. I know. Do you love her? I definitely don't hate her anymore. Well, I hope you do the right thing. What's the right thing? I don't know, I just hope you do it. And then he just cries in her arms. It's so sad. This is just such a shitty situation. I'm so mad at how this is written. Chapter 36. It's later that night after talking to his mom, and he's like, okay, I need to go and like be with her. He goes over to Kenna's house. She's taking a shower. He's banging on the door. She comes out. They just start making out, and he's like, we shouldn't do this. This isn't appropriate. Like, this will never work between us. Like, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, yeah, I know, but like, I'll respect your boundaries after tonight. And so they bang, and he sleeps over. I turn around and face him, and then I lift my hand and touch his cheek. I would have fallen for you even if you didn't love DM. His expression shifts, and then he kisses the inside of my palm. I fell for you because of how much you do. In the following chapter, they wake up late. He gives her a ride to the grocery store, drops her off, and then immediately decides, okay, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna talk to Grace and Patrick and try and, you know, be honest about the situation. I'll tell them about Kenna, and like, we'll try and work this out, and like, everything will be okay. Instead, when he shows up to Patrick and Grace's house, they already know. They drove by and they saw his truck in front of her apartment. Patrick confronts him in the front yard, and he's like, what the fuck? And punches him. Punches Ledger in the face. Ledger takes it. He's like, I deserve it. It's cool. Ledger's dad sees what's happening, runs out to, like, you know, break up the fight, and Patrick punches him again. Busts his lip. He has to go to the hospital to get stitches, gives him a black eye. Like, not good at all. Ledger is just saying, like, you guys don't understand. Like, I respect your decisions, but, like, you don't get it. His face falls into the saddest frown. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. He tells Patrick, we've all been wrong about her. He releases a half-hearted laugh, and then his face falls into the saddest frown, his eyebrows drawn apart. Have we? We've been wrong? Did she not leave my son to die? Did your best friend not spend his last hours on Earth alone on a deserted road, barely breathing because of her? It was an accident, Patrick. She loved Scotty. She panicked and made the wrong choice, but she paid for that choice, and at what point can we stop blaming her? He chose to answer that question with his fist. He punches me hard in the mouth. So then Ledger is pleading with Patrick and Grace to hear him out, of like, she's not a bad person, like, we've been doing her wrong, like, this isn't fair. And Patrick says, don't you dare put your choices on us. You can choose that woman or you can choose DM, but don't you dare try to make us feel guilty for a choice we came to peace with 5 years ago. You did this to yourself, Ledger. And so he leaves. He goes to the bar. Roman sees the bloodiedness, clocks that he needs stitches, and takes him to the hospital. After this whole situation, we cut to Kenna's perspective, and Kenna has no idea what's going on. She's working, she's vibing, she's happy. She got a promotion to cashier, so she's making more money at the grocery store. And when Ledger comes to pick her up from work that night and drive her home, he's wearing sunglasses and like strategically looking away and like won't make eye contact with her, you know, like won't turn his face toward her until he drops her off. And she sees how bruised and bloodied he is, and she realizes, like, they're making him choose. Like, Patrick did that to him, and they're making him choose between her or DM. They have a little bit of heart-to-heart. Ledger gives her his credit card and asks her to leave. There are people who find peace in forgiveness, and there are others who look at forgiveness as betrayal. To them, forgiving me would feel like betraying their own son. I can only hope that they change their minds someday, but until then, this is my life. This is where it's led me. This is where I start over again, and I'm gonna have to do it without Ledger or his encouragement or his belief in me. I'm sobbing now, but I'm still able to hear the front door when it swings back open. And Ledger comes back in and kisses her like it's the last kiss that he'll ever give her. And they're crying together. So as Ledger leaves, she calls after him and she says, "Don't hate them, okay? They're giving my little girl a good life. Please don't hate them." He barely nods, but it's a nod. And when he lets go of my hand, I don't watch him as he leaves. A few seconds later, I hear my apartment door shut. I slide to the floor and I fall apart. Chapter 39, Ledger. Instead of, tucking his tail between his legs or doing some self-reflection or anything that like any responsible adult man would do, he instead goes directly to Patrick and Grace's house to confront them. He goes to them and he's like, "Hey, I want to talk to Diem." Earlier, before he got punched in the face, Diem was excited to show him her pet turtle. Obviously, that didn't happen. She named the turtle Ledger. That's so cute. I know that Patrick and Grace love Diem, and I know that they love me, so the last thing they would ever want to do is separate the two of us. They can be angry, but they also know how much Diem loves me. So even if the three of us can't work our shit out, I know I'll always be a huge part of Diem's life, and as long as I'm part of Diem's life, I'm going to fight for what's best for her. I should have been doing it all along, and what's best for Diem is having a mother in her life. That's why I did what I did before I left Kenna's apartment. As soon as Kenna closed her bathroom door, I closed her apartment door and pretended to leave. Instead, I grabbed her phone. The password was an easy guess. Diem's birthday. I opened her Google Docs and found the file with all the letters that she'd written to Scotty, and I forwarded it to my email address before sneaking out. Right? Prints the letter about Scotty's death. In Patrick's office while he's over there visiting, walks it down to Grace and Patrick when he's about to leave. "I have something I need to say. I really don't want to yell, but if I have to, I will. So I think you should go outside with me because I don't want to wake up Diem." Patrick closes the dishwasher. "We really don't want to hear what you have to say, Ledger." He motions toward the door. "You should go." I have a lot of empathy for them, but I'm afraid I've just hit my limit. A wave of heat climbs up my neck, and I try to push down my anger, but it's so hard when I've given them so much. I recall the words Kenna said to me right before I left her. "Please don't hate them. I've given my life to that little girl. You owe this to me. I'm not leaving your property until we talk about this." So he walks out. He hands them this paper. She writes letters to him. To Scotty. She's been doing it for 5 years. This is the only one that I've read, but it's enough to change my entire opinion of her. Actually, that's not true. I forgave Kenna before I even knew the contents of the letter, but the second she read this out loud to me, I realized that she's been hurting just as much as all of us have, and we're slowly killing her by continuing to drag out her pain. We are keeping a mother from her child. That's not okay. Scotty would be so mad at us. It grows quiet when I stop speaking. Too quiet. It's like they aren't even breathing. I hand Grace the letter. It'll be a hard read, but I'm not asking you to read it because I'm in love with Kenna. I'm asking you to read it because your son was in love with Kenna. I hate this so much. I hate everything that's happening. We cut to chapter 40 from Kenna's perspective, and she wakes up with a migraine because of how much she cried that night, realizing that Ledger has left and she doesn't stand a chance with her kid, and everything's coming to an end and blah blah blah. And she thinks, and I think this is actually profound. I actually really found this kind of interesting and valuable. Sometimes I wonder if we're all born with equal amounts of good and evil. What if no one person is more or less malevolent than another, and that we all just release our bads at different times in different ways? Maybe some of us expel most of our bad behavior as toddlers, while some of us are absolute horrors during teenage years. And then maybe there are those who expend very little malice until they're adults. And even then, it just seeps out slowly, a little bit every day until we die. But then that would mean there are people like me, those who release their bad all at once, in one horrific night. When you get all your evil out at once, The impact is much greater than if it seeps out slowly. The destruction you leave behind covers a much bigger circumference on a map, and it takes up a much larger space in people's memories. I don't want to believe that there are good and bad people and no in-between people. I don't want to believe that I'm worse than anyone else, as if there's a bucket full of evil somewhere within me that continues to refill every time it runs empty. I don't want to believe I'm capable of repeating behavior that I've displayed in the past, but even after all these years, people are still suffering because of me. She gets a knock on the door from Ledger. I think the rest of this book, I'm not even going to finish it. I'm 92% of the way. There's like 20 pages left. She gets a knock on the door. It's Ledger. Ledger says, "Hey, we need to talk." She's like, "Okay." She opens the door. He's like, "Not we." And then Grace shows up. After reading the letter last night, Grace is like, "I need to talk to Kenna." I'm not even going to look at this shit. I'm so fucking done with this book. Grace sits on the couch with Kenna. She apologizes for how shitty that they've been treating her, and like, I didn't realize you were going through this, and this is so horrible and sad and whatever. And then she pulls out a baggie, and it has the ring that she and Scotty picked out from forever ago. The little ring from the pawn shop. After he found out it was $4,000 and he couldn't afford it, he went to his parents and asked for a loan because he's like, "I'm not going to be able to afford this for a long time, but I want to marry her, and like, this is the ring, like, this is the one. Like, can I please borrow money from you guys so I can buy this for her?" And so Grace had been sitting on this ring for her from Scotty this whole time, and Grace didn't want to give it to her. She was going to hold on to it and maybe give it to DM one day, but after reading that letter, she decided that Kenna deserved it. So Kenna puts the ring on, and it's still a perfect fit, and it's like so cute. You know, they have this moment and they're like crying it out, and she's like, "I want you to come to dinner tonight to meet DM." That night, Kenna shows up and she's nervous as shit, but she comes. Grace gives her a hug. Patrick gives her a hug. Ledger is there, you know, he's kind of like off to the side though, and DM is playing in the backyard with her turtle, and she doesn't really know who Kenna is. You know, Ledger introduces her as a friend. You know, they play together, and she invites her to come onto the swing set playground thing. When they're in like one of the little dome things on the playground, Kenna's like, "Hey, like, I'm your mother, like, I'm your mom." And DM's like, "Okay, cool. Do you want to see this other thing?" And then like totally moves on from the topic. And Kenna's like, "I thought this would have been such a big deal. I thought this would have been like a huge deal to her, and this would have mattered. And I imagine this going, you know, so many different ways ever since I had her, but this didn't do any of that because she's a kid and she doesn't care." It was so anticlimactic. Ledger's watching her play with DM, and he's like, "I love this woman. She's so great." And Grace is watching, and Patrick's watching, and they're like, "Oh my God, she's so great. She's such a good woman. Like, she's a perfect fit for our family, and I can't believe we've kept her away from DM for so long." And they live happily ever after. What do you want me to say? There's a bunch of talk about forgiveness. It's an amazing hug, a forgiving hug. "Hey," she says soothingly, "Hey, listen to me. We go forward. That's it. It's that simple. I forgive you. You forgive me. We move forward together and give that little girl the best life that we can give her, okay?" I nod because that's all I can do. I forgive them. I've always forgiven them. It's myself that I've been hard on. But I think I've reached the point that forgiving myself finally feels okay. So I do. You're forgiven, Kenna. The last chapter is from Ledger. It proves that time, distance, and devastation allow people enough opportunity to craft villains out of people they don't even know. But Kenna was never a villain. She was a victim. We all were. A victim of her driving under the influence, right? A victim of her abandoning Scotty on the side of the road, right? They all forgive her. That's it. And then on the back porch, Patrick and Ledger are back there, and they're talking about Kenna and her being part of the family, and Patrick's like, "She's a perfect fit, and it's so amazing, and we should have forgiven her so much sooner." And like, "Oh my God, it's so crazy." "Holy shit," Patrick says. I follow his line of sight until, no way. I'll be damned. Is that a fucking pigeon? It's an actual pigeon. A real live white and gray pigeon just walking around the backyard like it's the most like it isn't the most miraculous timing a bird has ever had in the history of birds. Patrick laughs. It's a laugh full of bewilderment. He laughs so much that it makes me laugh, but he doesn't cry. It's the first time a reminder of Scotty doesn't make him cry, and I feel like this is huge. Not only because the chances of this random pigeon landing in the backyard at this very moment is probably 1 in a billion, but because Patrick and I have never had a serious conversation related to Scotty that didn't end in me sneaking away so he could cry alone. But he laughs, and that's all he does. And for the first time since Scotty died, I feel a sense of hope for him, for all of us. And then this, like, fuck, it just keeps getting worse. He takes Kenna to his house to, like, sleep in his bed and spend the night over at his house. And so she's like, oh my God. So she lays in his bed because it's the first real bed that she has had in, like, 5 or 6 years at this point, right? Between jail and prison, the halfway house, the air mattress, like, this is the first time that she has been on a legit mattress. And so she is just, like, soaking it up. I bring my hand back up to her face and touch her impeccable mouth again. I've spent the last couple of years trying to be a good role model for DM, so I've read a couple books on feminism. I learned that putting too much focus on a girl's looks can be damaging, so instead of telling DM how pretty I think she is, I put a focus on all things that matter, like how smart she is and how strong she is. I've tried treating you the same way. It's why I've never complimented your looks before or told you how fucking beautiful I think you are, but I'm glad I've never told you before this moment because you've never been more beautiful than you are right now. I kissed the tip of her nose. Happiness looks good on you, Kenna. I can't stop thinking about that fucking pigeon. What are the chances that Scotty had no connection to them? What are the chances he did? It could have just been a coincidence, but it also could have been a sign, a message from wherever he is. Maybe it doesn't matter whether something is a coincidence or a sign. Maybe the best way to cope with the loss of people we love is to find them in as many places and things as we possibly can. And in the off chance that the people we lose are still somehow able to hear us, maybe we should never stop talking to them. I'm gonna be good to your girls, Scotty, I promise. And the book ends. The book like actually ends with Kenna taking DM to that like roadside memorial where she stole that cross from, and they're putting the cross back where it goes, and they're listening to music, and music still makes me think of Scotty, but thinking of Scotty no longer makes me sad. Now that I have forgiven myself, the reminders of him only make me smile. Fuck me, dude. In the God damn it. In the epilogue, I don't give a shit, whatever. The last name I handed out 2 weeks ago was by far one of the most important ones, yet somehow the easiest name to come up with. When they placed our newborn son on my chest, I looked down through teary eyes and I said, "Hi, Scotty." I don't think I like that. The goodwill and the tears and the good vibes that I just had, I highlighted that, but now I'm reflecting on it and I don't think I like that. I don't think I like the idea that you're naming the baby that you had with his best friend after him. Oh, it's in honor of him. Oh my God, like, we just want to think of Scotty every time that we want to be reminded of this person we loved. Yeah, but like, you fucked his best friend. I don't know, man. I'm so torn on this book. Obviously, it makes me very emotional, but I also feel like that's coming from a place of trauma. I'm so sensitive to like young people dying, you know, and like the impact it has on their children and on their futures, and like the regret and stuff that kind of like comes with relationships like that I feel like I am like wholeheartedly, I will admit that I am biased to those feelings. And so I'm like, I don't want to be blindsided by personal stuff, but also, you know, I also don't want to be blindsided by personal stuff of me being a vengeful hater ass bitch either, you know? How did I like this book? I don't know, it was rough. It was promising. I think Ledger was a great main male character. I think he was supportive and loving and like, you know what I mean? He was good people. I hate the way that it was such like an instantaneous forgiveness against Kenna when I don't think she really did anything to necessarily deserve it. I don't know. To be frank, I really don't know if I could ever forgive what Kenna did. And I think that might be the biggest problem with the whole book is like, even despite reading from her perspective and reading all of that, I just could never fathom just leaving. How do you just leave that situation? And then how does he just like instantly forgive her and like force Scotty's parents into forgiving her? At least he's getting some out of it, you know what I'm saying? Like, at least he's getting something. What are they getting? Just more trauma after a child that they like didn't sign up for and now they have to be parents again? Yeah, they get like a piece of their son, but also DM doesn't look anything like Scotty. Like, they look at DM's face and all they see is Kenna. How do you reconcile that? How do you feel? I don't feel anything but sadness for that family. Also, by the end of it, I don't think I said it, but they decide like Kenna and Ledger stay in that house, and then they sell the other house that he was building with Roman. He sells it to Roman, like at cost for materials or something. So then they stay across the street from Grace and Patrick and DM, and then Ledger and Kenna, and they like share custody like 2 or 3 nights a week or something. She sleeps over with them. I don't fucking know, dude. I'm so over this book. I felt a lot of emotions. The vibes were mediocre at best. The idea was great. It was just like executed so shittily that it made me mad. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what you thought of this book. What did you rank it? Have you read it before? What did you think of this review? Did you like what I did? Do you want to see another review from me? What do you want to see me review? I don't know. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the fucking deal, bro. I don't need to tell you. I post polls on Fridays or Saturdays of what people want to see next. So keep an eye out for that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the support. This channel has already blown up above and beyond anything that I could ever imagine. And I am so beyond grateful for each and every single one of you watching this. I'll see you in the next one.